Rain hammered the glass walls of the Castellane Tower penthouse, while Kael Virelli fastened diamond cufflinks onto his wrists like a man arming himself for battle. Tonight was the Dominion Syndicate Ball, the kind of night where billionaires kissed babies for cameras while quietly arranging murders in bathroom stalls. He adjusted his black tuxedo in the mirror, admiring the sharp angles of his own jaw, believing with absolute certainty that the city belonged to him. Behind him, the bedroom door opened. His wife stepped inside wearing cream silk and exhaustion. "I want a divorce," Lysandra said quietly. Kael laughed. Then he walked out with his mistress and left her standing alone in the wreckage of their marriage. What he didn't know was that his wife had just made one phone call, and somewhere beneath the city's glittering skyline, the most dangerous man on the eastern seaboard was already moving. If you want to see how this story ends, if you want to watch a queen reclaim her throne, stay with me until the final word. Hit that like button right now and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. Because what's about to unfold isn't just about revenge, it's about power. And the woman everyone underestimated is about to remind an entire empire exactly who she's always been. The rain arrived without warning, the way most disasters do. Lysandra Vale stood at the bedroom window watching water streak down 40 stories of glass, while her husband dressed for the Dominion Ball like a man preparing to accept a crown he believed he'd earned alone. She had been standing there for 7 minutes. Kael hadn't noticed. He never noticed anymore. "You should wear the emerald necklace tonight," he said without looking at her. His voice carried the flat tone of someone giving instructions to staff. "Matches the dress I picked out for you." Lysandra didn't turn around. "I'm not going." That got his attention. Kael paused mid-button, his reflection catching hers in the mirror. For a moment, something almost resembling curiosity crossed his face. Then it vanished beneath the polished indifference he wore better than any suit. "What do you mean you're not going?" "Exactly what I said." He turned fully now, studying her the way someone might study a malfunctioning appliance. "Lysandra, this is the Dominion Ball. Every syndicate captain on the eastern seaboard will be there. Senator Hargrove, the Volkov family. This isn't optional." "For you," she said quietly. "Not for me." Kael's jaw tightened. She recognized that look. It was the same expression he wore when a business deal wasn't closing fast enough, when someone had the audacity to tell him no. He crossed the room slowly, each step deliberate, until he stood close enough that she could smell his cologne. Expensive, suffocating. "Is this about Celine?" Lysandra finally turned to face him. "Should it be?" His eyes flickered, just briefly, just enough to confirm what she'd suspected for months. "There's nothing between us," he said smoothly. "She's a consultant. She understands the expansion into the Northern Territories better than anyone else. It's business." "You're a terrible liar, Kael, and you're being dramatic." The words landed between them like a slap. Lysandra felt something cold and final settle into her chest. 8 years. 8 years of making herself smaller so he could feel larger. 8 years of erasing her name, her family, her entire history so that his enemies wouldn't become hers. 8 years of standing 3 steps behind him at events like tonight while he collected power like other men collected watches. She had given him everything, and he had never once asked what it cost her. "I want a divorce," she said. The room went completely still. Kael stared at her like she'd just spoken a language he didn't recognize. Then he laughed. Not cruelly, almost genuinely confused. "You don't mean that? I've never meant anything more in my life." "Lysandra." His voice shifted into something that might have been mistaken for gentleness if you didn't know him better. "You're upset. I understand. The last few months have been stressful with the expansion. I've been distracted. But divorce?" He shook his head slowly. "That's not how this works." "Actually," she said, her voice steady, "that's exactly how this works." Kael's expression hardened. There it was. The real man beneath the expensive suits and polished speeches. The man who believed the world existed to serve his ambition. "You're too quiet for my world," he said flatly. "You always have been. Celine understands what it takes to build an empire. She understands ambition, hunger, the willingness to do whatever it takes." He straightened his cufflinks with sharp, angry movements. You've spent 8 years smiling politely at fundraisers while I actually built something. Don't confuse proximity to power with possessing it. Lysandra said nothing. She simply watched him the way you might watch a stranger on a train platform. Someone whose life was about to intersect with yours for just a moment before diverging forever. Cale checked his watch. I'm leaving in 10 minutes. Celine is meeting me downstairs. You can come or not. But if you're serious about this divorce conversation, we'll have it after the ball, when you've had time to think clearly. He walked out. The bedroom door closed with a soft, final click. Lysandra remained standing at the window for exactly 5 seconds. Then she moved with the calm precision of someone who had been planning this moment far longer than anyone realized. She crossed to her vanity and pressed the hidden release beneath the drawer. It slid open with a whisper. Inside was a single black envelope. The wax seal pressed into the paper bore a crest that hadn't been publicly displayed in over a decade. A serpent coiled around a crown, fangs bared. Anyone in the city's underworld would recognize it instantly. Most would refuse to speak its name aloud. The Veil Syndicate. Lysandra broke the seal and pulled out the documents inside. Proof of lineage, corporate holdings, shell companies, real estate portfolios, financial instruments so complex they required 3 lawyers and a forensic accountant to untangle. And buried in the middle of it all, one devastating truth. 40% of everything Cale Varelli had built belonged to her, not through marriage, through blood. She picked up her phone and dialed a number she hadn't called in 8 years. It rang once. Lysandra. The voice on the other end was dark smoke and distant thunder. I was wondering when you'd call. Cash in, she said quietly. It's time. There was a pause, then something that might have been a smile in his voice. I'll be there in 20 minutes. She ended the call and looked at herself in the mirror. The woman staring back barely resembled the girl who had married Cale Varelli 8 years ago. That girl had been young, hopeful, stupid enough to believe that love could survive ambition. This woman knew better. 40 stories below, Cale Varelli climbed into the back of a black Mercedes while Celine Marrow slid in beside him, wearing a dress that cost more than most people's cars. She was beautiful in the calculated way of women who understood that beauty was currency. Sharp cheekbones, ice blue eyes, a smile that promised danger if you were stupid enough to get close. Where's your wife? She asked, already knowing the answer. Not coming. Cale didn't elaborate. Celine's smile widened slightly. Shame. I was looking forward to meeting her. No, you weren't. You're right. She leaned back against the leather seat, studying him with the kind of focus that made weaker men uncomfortable. I was looking forward to her seeing us together. There's a difference. Cale said nothing. The car pulled into traffic, rain hammering the roof like bullets. He stared out the window at the city sliding past. His city, as far as he was concerned. The Varelli name had become synonymous with power over the last decade. From shipping ports to political campaigns to the kind of backroom deals that kept entire industries running, Cale had built an empire that made other men nervous. And he'd done it all himself, or so he believed. You're thinking about her, Celine observed. I'm thinking about the Volkov negotiation, Cale lied. Dmitri's been stalling on the northern expansion for 3 months. Tonight I need him to commit. He will. Celine's voice carried absolute certainty. Men like Dmitri respect strength. You walk into that ballroom with me instead of your invisible wife, and he'll see exactly what kind of man you are. Cale glanced at her. What kind is that? The kind who takes what he wants. The Mercedes pulled up to the Dominion Hotel 20 minutes later. Camera flashes erupted like lightning as Cale stepped out onto the red carpet with Celine on his arm. Reporters shouted questions, photographers angled for better shots. Security kept the crowds back while Cale moved through it all with the easy confidence of someone who had been famous long enough to forget what anonymity felt like. But as they climbed the marble steps toward the ballroom entrance, he heard it. The whispers. Where's Lysandra? She never misses this event. Who is that woman with him? That's Celine Marrow, the consultant from the Northern Territories. Consultant. Right. Cale's jaw tightened. He ignored it. Celine pressed closer to his side, her hand sliding around his arm possessively. They passed through the golden doors into the ballroom itself. The Dominion Ballroom was exactly what its name suggested, a monument to wealth so excessive it bordered on obscene. Crystal chandeliers hung from 50-foot ceilings like frozen waterfalls. Gold leaf covered every surface that wasn't already marble or glass. Waiters in white gloves circulated with champagne that cost more per bottle than most people earned in a month. And everywhere, power. Syndicate bosses in Italian suits, politicians with practiced smiles, investors who moved markets with phone calls, arms dealers, corporate raiders, the kind of people who appeared in Forbes profiles while simultaneously appearing on Interpol watch lists. This was Kael's world. He moved through it like a king surveying his kingdom. Senator Hargrove approached first, his handshake firm and meaningless. Kael, good to see you. I was hoping we could discuss the infrastructure bill. There are some amendments that would benefit your shipping interests significantly. My office will call yours Monday, Kael replied smoothly. Dmitry Volkov came next, a boulder of a man with a silver beard and eyes like a frozen lake. Virelli, we should talk about the northern ports, privately. Later, Kael said. After dinner. One by one they came, paying respects, making requests, offering deals. Kael accepted it all with the casual grace of someone who had been powerful long enough to make it look easy. But the whispers continued. Where's Lysandra? I heard they're separating. About time. She never belonged in this world anyway. Celine heard them too. She smiled. Fog. Across the city, Lysandra stepped out of the shower and stared at her reflection through the steam. Water dripped from her hair. Her skin was flushed from the heat. She looked soft, vulnerable, exactly what Kael had always wanted her to be. She dried off slowly, then opened her closet. The cream silk dresses Kael preferred were pushed to the back. Instead, she reached for something she hadn't worn in 8 years. The black gown hung like a shadow-made fabric. She pulled it on slowly, feeling the weight of it settle across her shoulders like armor. The neckline plunged. The fabric hugged every line of her body with architectural precision. It was the kind of dress that didn't ask for attention. It demanded it. Lysandra fastened the diamond choker around her throat. Not the emerald necklace Kael had mentioned. This was older. A family heirloom passed down through 3 generations of Vale women. Each stone was flawless. Each setting was worth enough to buy a small country. She painted her lips dark red, lined her eyes with kohl, pulled her hair back into a severe knot that exposed the sharp lines of her face. When she looked in the mirror this time, she didn't see Kael's quiet wife. She saw her mother, her grandmother. Every Vale woman who had ever walked into a room and watched powerful men flinch. The intercom buzzed. Ms. Vale, the doorman's voice crackled. You have a visitor. Send him up. She walked to the living room and poured 2 glasses of whiskey. 60-year-old single malt. The kind of alcohol that tasted like smoke and violence. She was holding both glasses when the elevator doors opened. Cassian Drakov stepped into the penthouse like darkness taking human form. He was tall, 6'3", maybe 6'4", broad shoulders beneath a black suit that looked like it had been tailored by someone who understood that clothing was just another form of weaponry. His face was all hard angles and old scars. A tattoo disappeared beneath his collar. Serpent scales, probably, though Lysandra had never asked. His eyes were the color of gunmetal and just as cold, except when he looked at her. Then they softened, just slightly, just enough to remind her that beneath the carefully constructed monster was a man who had spent 8 years standing in shadows because she had asked him to. Hello, Cassian. Lysandra. His voice was gravel and broken glass. He crossed the room slowly, studying her the way someone might study a painting they'd been forbidden to touch. You look like your mother tonight. Is that a compliment or a warning? Both. She handed him one of the whiskey glasses, their fingers brushed. Cassian's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. You're sure about this? He asked. Yes. Once you walk into that ballroom, there's no going back. Everyone will know. Good. Cassian drank his whiskey in one swallow. Your father would be proud. My father is dead, which is why I'm still alive. He set the empty glass down carefully. He made me promise to protect you, even from yourself if necessary. Walking back into that world, Lysandra, the people who killed him are still out there. The families who wanted the Vale Syndicate buried with him. They'll see you as a threat. I am a threat. Something almost like a smile crossed Cassian's scarred face. Yes, you are. He moved closer close enough that Lysandra could smell leather and gunpowder, and something darker she couldn't name. For 8 years they had maintained careful distance. For 8 years Cassian had stayed in the shadows while she played the role of Kael Virelli's invisible wife. For 8 years they had pretended. "Why now?" Cassian asked quietly. "Why tonight?" "Because I'm tired of being small," Lysandra said. "Because he looked at me tonight like I was furniture he'd forgotten to dust. Because I gave him 8 years and he gave me nothing." "He gave you his name." "I never wanted his name. I wanted to be seen." She met Cassian's eyes. "You've seen me. Since the beginning. Even when I asked you not to." Cassian's hand rose slowly. His fingers ghosted along her jaw, but didn't quite touch. "I've seen you every single day for 8 years. Watching you shrink yourself for him was the hardest thing I've ever done. And I've done a lot of hard things. I know. If we do this—" He stopped. Started again. "If you take back what's yours tonight, it won't just destroy Kael. It'll drag you back into the world you left. Blood, violence, the kind of decisions that don't leave you clean." "I was never clean," Lysandra said. "I was just pretending." Cassian's thumb traced her cheekbone. "I've waited a long time to hear you say that." "How long?" 8 years, 3 months, 17 days. Lysandra's breath caught. "You counted every single one." His voice dropped to something barely above a whisper. "I love you. I've loved you since before you married him. I've loved you through every smile you faked at his fundraisers, every night you came home looking emptier than the night before. I've loved you silently and from a distance because you asked me to, but I won't do it anymore." "Cassian, if we walk into that ballroom tonight, everyone will know. Not just about the syndicate, about us, about what I've been to you all along." He finally let his hand drop. "So I need to know. Are you doing this for revenge, or are you doing this because you're finally ready to stop hiding?" Lysandra looked at him for a long moment. This man who had been her father's enforcer, her family's weapon, the person who had protected her from the shadows while she played at being normal, the person who had loved her when loving her was the most dangerous thing he could possibly do. "Both," she said finally. Cassian's smile was sharp and terrible and beautiful. "Good. Then let's go remind your husband exactly who he married." Walk. They arrived at the Dominion Hotel at 9:47 p.m. The red carpet was mostly empty now. The photographers had packed up their cameras, the crowds had dispersed, but the doorman stood straighter when the black Bentley pulled up. One of them actually went pale. Cassian stepped out first. Then he offered his hand to Lysandra. She took it. The moment her heels touched red carpet, something shifted in the air. The doormen exchanged glances. One of them spoke urgently into his radio. Lysandra could hear the panic in his voice even from 15 feet away. "Sir, you need to tell Mr. Virelli. Tell him right now. She's here." They climbed the marble steps together. Cassian moved like violence wearing a suit. Lysandra moved like a woman who had finally stopped apologizing for taking up space. The golden doors swung open. The ballroom noise hit them first. Conversation. Laughter. The clink of champagne glasses. But as they crossed the threshold, something happened. The conversation slowed, then stopped. One by one, heads turned. Lysandra felt the weight of 300 people staring at her simultaneously. She met their eyes. Didn't smile. Didn't flinch. Just walked. The crowd parted. Not because anyone asked them to, because power had just entered the room and everyone could feel it. At the far end of this ballroom, Kael Virelli stood beside Dmitry Volkov and Senator Hargrove, mid-negotiation. Celine was laughing at something the senator had said. Then she saw Lysandra. Her laugh died. Kael turned slowly. His eyes found Lysandra across 200 feet of marble floor. For a moment, just one moment, she saw recognition in his face, then confusion, then something that might have been fear. Then he saw Cassian beside her. The blood drained from Kael's face so fast Lysandra thought he might actually collapse. Dmitry Volkov's expression shifted from polite interest to something approaching shock. "Is that—" "Yes," someone nearby whispered. "That's Lysandra Vale." The name rippled through the ballroom like a stone dropped in still water. Lysandra Vale, not Virelli, Vale. And suddenly everyone understood. Senator Hargrove's practiced smile vanished. He took an involuntary step backward. Celine's confidence cracked like glass. Even Dmitry Volkov, a man who had survived 3 assassination attempts and a hostile takeover by the Russian mob, looked genuinely unsettled, because everyone in that room knew the Veil Syndicate, and everyone knew what it meant that Lysandra had just walked in beside Cassian Drakov. Kael recovered first. He always did. He straightened his shoulders and started across the ballroom toward her with the forced confidence of a man trying to convince himself he was still in control. He made it exactly 12 feet before someone stepped into his path. Marcus Chen. Steel magnate. Syndicate affiliate. The kind of man who moved hundreds of millions in untraceable currency before breakfast. Kael, Marcus said carefully. Perhaps now isn't the time. Get out of my way. I'm trying to help you. I don't need help dealing with my wife. Marcus's expression was pure pity. That's not your wife anymore. That's Lysandra Vale, and if you're smart, you'll let her come to you. But Kael had never been smart, not when his pride was involved. He pushed past Marcus and continued across the ballroom. Lysandra watched him approach with the calm detachment of someone watching a stranger walk toward a cliff edge in the dark. Cassian didn't move, didn't tense, didn't even shift his weight, but something about his stillness was more threatening than any aggressive posture could have been. Kael stopped 3 feet away. Up close, Lysandra could see the cracks in his composure, the sweat beading at his hairline, the way his hands were clenched into fists at his sides. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. What the hell are you doing? He finally managed. Attending the ball, Lysandra said calmly. You said it wasn't optional. Kael's eyes darted to Cassian. Who is this? Cassian's smile was all teeth. You don't know me, Varelli? I'm hurt. Should I? Yes. The word was soft, dangerous. You should. Realization dawned slowly across Kael's face. You're Cassian Drakov. There it is. Kael looked at Lysandra, then at Cassian, then back at Lysandra. His mind was racing. She could practically see him trying to piece it together. Why was his wife here with one of the most feared operators on the eastern seaboard? Why was Cassian looking at her like she was something precious? Why was everyone in the ballroom suddenly treating her like... Oh, Kael breathed. Oh no. Lysandra said nothing. She simply reached into her clutch and pulled out a folded piece of paper. Kael stared at it like it was a snake. What is that? Open it. Lysandra. Open it. His hand shook slightly as he unfolded the document. Lysandra watched his eyes track across the text, watched his expression move through denial, confusion, disbelief, understanding, horror. The document was simple, 10 pages of legal language that all said the same thing. The Veil Syndicate owned 40% of everything Kael Varelli had built. The shipping ports, the real estate, the shell corporations, the political connections. All of it had been propped up by Veil money from the very beginning. And as of tonight, Lysandra was reclaiming it. Kael looked up at her. This isn't real. It's very real. His voice cracked. You can't just... I can. And I am. People were edging closer now, trying to hear, trying to understand what was happening at the center of the ballroom. Lysandra raised her voice just slightly, not shouting, just ensuring everyone could hear. 8 years ago, I walked away from my family name to protect you, she said. The Veil Syndicate had enemies, dangerous enemies, people who would have used you to get to me. So I hid. I erased myself. I made myself small and quiet and invisible so that you could build your empire without constantly looking over your shoulder. Kael's hands were shaking. Lysandra, please. I gave you everything, she continued. My connections, my money, my silence. And you never even asked why your deals closed so easily. Why doors opened for you that stayed closed for everyone else? Why dangerous men treated you with respect you hadn't earned yet? Someone in the crowd gasped softly. It was me, Lysandra said. It was always me. And you never even noticed. Kael's face had gone gray. Around them, the ballroom had gone completely silent. 300 people watching a king realize he'd never actually worn a crown. So here's what happens now, Lysandra said quietly. You're going to sign the divorce papers my lawyers will deliver tomorrow morning. You're going to transfer back the 40% of your empire that legally belongs to the Veil Syndicate, and you're going to do it quietly. And if I don't? Cassian spoke for the first time. Then we'll do it loudly. The threat hung in the air like smoke. Kyle looked around desperately. At Senator Hargrove, at Dmitry Volkov, at Marcus Chen, at all the powerful men he'd called allies for the last decade. Not one of them met his eyes. They had already chosen sides. And it wasn't his. Celine Marrow appeared at Kyle's elbow suddenly. She'd been watching from a distance but couldn't stay away anymore. Kyle, we should go. I'm not going anywhere. Yes, Celine said urgently. You are. Right now. But Kyle had spent too many years being powerful to recognize when power had shifted away from him. He reached out and grabbed Lysandra's wrist. Not hard, but firm enough to make his point. You don't get to just walk away from... Cassian moved. Not loudly, not dramatically. He simply stepped between them with the fluid grace of someone who had ended lives with his bare hands and lost exactly 0 sleep over it. Kyle released Lysandra's wrist like it had burned him. Cassian didn't touch him, didn't threaten him, didn't even raise his voice. He just stood there, radiating the kind of danger that made survival instincts scream warnings. She asked you nicely, Cassian said softly. I won't. Kyle stumbled backward. Lysandra looked at the man she had married 8 years ago. The man she had made herself smaller for. The man who had never once looked at her and truly seen her. Goodbye, Kyle, she said. Then she turned and walked toward the ballroom exit with Cassian at her side. Behind her, she heard it start. The whispers. Did you know? The Veil Syndicate. I thought they were finished. Apparently not. She played him for 8 years. Varelli's finished. You can't recover from this. Lysandra didn't look back. She walked through the golden doors and down the marble steps into the rain-soaked night, while behind her, inside the ballroom, Kyle Varelli stood alone in front of 300 people and felt his empire crack apart beneath his feet. The black Bentley was waiting. Cassian opened the door for her. Lysandra slid into the back seat. He climbed in beside her and the car pulled away from the Dominion Hotel, while camera flashes erupted from the few photographers still lingering. They'd have their story by morning. The city slid past outside the windows. Rain, lights, people living lives that had nothing to do with syndicate politics and power plays. For 8 years, Lysandra had tried to be one of them. Normal, quiet, safe. It had nearly killed her. Cassian reached across the seat and took her hand carefully, like something precious that had finally been returned where it belonged. How do you feel? He asked. Lysandra thought about it, really thought about it. Powerful, she said finally. Cassian smiled. Good, because tomorrow the real work starts. What real work? Taking back everything that's yours. He squeezed her hand gently. The Veil Syndicate has been operating in the shadows for a decade. Your father's lieutenants have been waiting. Your family's holdings have been dormant. And you, Lysandra Veil, have been invisible for far too long. She looked at him. You're asking me to take over. I'm asking you to stop pretending you're not already in charge. The car turned onto a private road that led toward the harbor district, toward the old Veil estate, toward the house Lysandra hadn't entered since her father's funeral. They're waiting, Cassian said quietly. Everyone who served your father, everyone who's been loyal to the Veil name, they've waited 10 years for the daughter to return, for the heir to claim what's hers. He met her eyes. They're waiting for you. Lysandra looked out at the dark harbor waters. She thought about Kyle standing alone in the ballroom. She thought about 8 years of silence. She thought about her mother's face the night she died, the way she'd gripped Lysandra's hand and whispered, "Never forget what you are. Never forget your name." "Take me home," Lysandra said. The Bentley pulled through the iron gates of the Veil estate at 11:34 p.m. The mansion rose from the darkness like a monument to old money and older violence. Lights burned in every window. Cars lined the circular driveway. People moved through the shadows. They were waiting. Just like Cassian said. The car stopped. Cassian climbed out first and offered his hand. Lysandra took it and stepped onto the gravel drive. The rain had stopped. The air smelled like salt water and concrete. The front doors opened. A man emerged. Tall. Thin. wearing a suit that had been expensive 20 years ago. His hair was silver, his eyes were sharp. He'd been her father's lawyer, his enforcer, his oldest friend, Vincent Cross. He looked at Lysandra for a long moment. Then he smiled. "Welcome home, Ms. Vale," he said. "We've been expecting you." Behind him, the doorway filled with faces. Some she recognized, some she didn't. Men and women who had served her father, who had kept the syndicate alive in the darkness, who had waited for this moment. Lysandra felt something settle into her chest. Not peace, not quite, but certainty. She had been Kyle Virelli's invisible wife for 8 years. That woman was gone. The woman walking up these steps was someone else entirely, someone dangerous, someone powerful, someone who had finally stopped apologizing for existing. Lysandra Vale climbed the steps slowly. Cassian walked beside her. When she reached the top, she turned to look back at the city spreading out beneath the estate. Somewhere out there, Kyle was realizing he'd lost everything. Somewhere out there, the news was already spreading. The Vale Syndicate had returned. And it was hungry. Updike. Inside the ballroom at the Dominion Hotel, Kyle Virelli stood in the center of a crowd that had suddenly become strangers. Senator Hargrove was already gone. Dmitry Volkov had made his excuses and disappeared toward the exits with his security team. Marcus Chen wouldn't look at him. Even Celine had taken 3 careful steps backward, distancing herself with practiced ease. Nobody wanted to stand too close to a sinking ship. Kyle's phone buzzed. Then again. Then continuously. Text messages, emails, calls. His shipping partners requesting clarification about their contracts. His investors asking about liquidity concerns. His political connections suddenly remembering prior commitments. His empire was dissolving in real time. One of his lieutenants approached carefully. "Sir, we should go." "I'm not leaving." "Sir, I said I'm not leaving." But even as he said it, Kyle could feel the ballroom emptying around him. People were already moving toward the exits. Not running, not panicking, just leaving. Conversations were happening in hushed tones. Alliances were being quietly renegotiated. The power structure of the entire eastern seaboard was shifting on its axis. And Kyle Virelli was on the wrong side of it. He looked down at the document still clutched in his hand. The proof. The undeniable truth. Lysandra Vale owned him. She'd always owned him, and he'd been too blind to see it. Celine touched his arm lightly. "We need to go, Kyle. Right now, before this gets worse." "How could it possibly get worse?" She didn't answer. She just looked at him with something that might have been pity if she'd been capable of actual human emotion. Kyle let her guide him toward the exit. Behind them, the Dominion ballroom continued emptying. By midnight, it would be deserted. By morning, the story would be everywhere. By the end of the week, the name Kyle Virelli would be a footnote, and Lysandra Vale would be the only name that mattered. Outside the hotel, rain had started again. Kyle stood beneath the awning watching his car pull up while camera flashes erupted around him. Reporters shouting questions he couldn't hear over the ringing in his ears. His phone buzzed again, and again, and again. Each vibration another crack in the foundation of everything he'd built. He climbed into the back seat. Celine didn't follow. "I'll call you," she said. She wouldn't. The car pulled away from the curb and Kyle Virelli disappeared into the rain-soaked night, while behind him, his empire crumbled to dust. The Vale estate smelled like old wood and older secrets. Lysandra stood in the main hall while rain hammered the windows, and men who had served her father watched her with expressions ranging from hope to skepticism to something that looked almost like hunger. The chandelier overhead cast fractured light across marble floors her mother had walked across 20 years ago. Everything felt too large, too heavy, like stepping into a museum dedicated to a version of herself she'd tried to forget. Vincent Cross closed the double doors behind her with a sound like a coffin lid dropping. "The family room," he said. "Everyone's waiting." Cassian touched her elbow lightly. "You don't have to do this tonight." "Yes, I do." They moved through hallways lined with portraits of dead Vale ancestors. Her great-grandfather staring down with eyes like gun barrels. Her grandmother wearing pearls and judgment in equal measure. Her father in the center of it all, painted the year before someone put 3 bullets in his chest and left him bleeding out on the dock behind this very house. Lysandra had been 19 when it happened. She'd spent the last 10 years trying to pretend it hadn't destroyed her. The family room was exactly as she remembered it. Dark wood paneling, leather furniture worn soft from decades of violent men sitting in it while making decisions that ruined lives. A bar cart in the corner stocked with whiskey that cost more than surgeries. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the harbor where her father had died. 15 people stood when she entered. Some she recognized. Marcus Lau, her father's head of security. Elena Petrov, who ran the Eastern shipping operations. James Cross, Vincent's younger brother, who handled the financial infrastructure nobody was supposed to know existed. Others were strangers. Younger faces. New blood brought in during the decade she'd been gone. They were all staring at her. "Sit," Vincent said. Nobody moved. Lysandra walked to the head of the table and remained standing. Cassian took position behind her right shoulder like a shadow with a pulse. The silence stretched until it became uncomfortable. Finally, Elena spoke. "You look like your mother." "I know." She wouldn't have hidden for 10 years. The words landed like a punch. Lysandra felt Cassian tense behind her, but she raised one hand slightly, stood down. This was her fight. "You're right," Lysandra said calmly. She wouldn't have. But she also wouldn't have made it to 30 if she'd married someone outside the family. "I did what I had to do to survive." "You married Kael Virelli," Marcus said. His voice was gravel scraping concrete. "A man with no real power who built his empire on our money and never even knew it." "Yes." "Why?" "Because I was 19 and stupid and thought I could have a normal life." Lysandra met his eyes without flinching. "I was wrong. Obviously." Elena leaned forward. "Your father made us promise to protect the Vale interests while you were—" She paused, searching for the right word. "Unavailable. We've done that. Kept the operations running, kept the territory secure, kept your inheritance intact." Her expression hardened. "What we didn't do was sit around waiting for you to remember you had responsibilities." "I never forgot." "Then why wait 8 years?" "Because he needed to betray me first," Lysandra said quietly. "I needed to know for certain that the marriage was dead before I burned it down. And I needed him to do it publicly, humiliate me, choose someone else. That way, when I took everything back, nobody could say I was just a bitter wife. They'd know I was a Vale." Silence. Then James Cross started laughing. It wasn't a pleasant sound. "You set him up. For 8 years, you played the long game." "I learned from the best." Vincent smiled thinly. "Your father would approve. He always said patience was a weapon most people were too stupid to use properly." He poured himself 3 fingers of whiskey. "But patience doesn't run an empire. Action does. So the question becomes, are you here to reclaim your inheritance, or are you here to actually do something with it?" Lysandra looked around the table at 15 faces waiting for her to prove she was worth following. "Both," she said. "Prove it." Kael Virelli controls 40% of the eastern shipping corridors. As of tonight, that 40% belongs to the Vale Syndicate again, which means we control the primary entry points for everything coming into the eastern seaboard: pharmaceuticals, electronics, textiles, weapons. She paused. "And everything else that moves through unofficial channels." Marcus's eyes narrowed. "You're talking about consolidation." "I'm talking about expansion. Kael spent a decade making connections with families that would have never done business with a Vale. The Volkovs, the Hargrove political machine, the Chen steel operations. He opened doors I couldn't have opened myself." Lysandra placed both hands flat on the table. "Now those doors belong to me. And everyone who allied with Kael Virelli is about to discover they were actually allied with the Vale Syndicate the entire time." Elena laughed once, sharp and surprised. "You weaponized your marriage." "Yes." "And the divorce?" "Finalized by the end of the week if he's smart. Contested litigation if he's not. Either way, the outcome is the same. I get my 40%. He gets to keep whatever's left and pretend he still matters." Vincent studied her carefully. "You're not doing this for revenge." "No." "Then why?" Lysandra thought about Kael's face when he told her she was too quiet for his world, too soft, too invisible. She thought about 8 years of making herself smaller while he collected power like trophies. She thought about the moment she'd finally looked in the mirror tonight and recognized the woman staring back. "Because I'm tired of being someone I'm not," she said simply. Vincent nodded slowly. Then he raised his glass. "To Lysandra Vale, welcome home." One by one, the others raised their glasses. "Welcome home." They drank, and Lysandra felt the weight of her father's empire settle across her shoulders like a crown made of razors. Across the city, Kyle Virelli sat in his penthouse office, surrounded by ringing phones he refused to answer. His lawyers had called 6 times, his accountants 4, his head of security twice. Senator Hargrove's chief of staff had left 3 increasingly urgent voicemails about repositioning the relationship and protecting mutual interests. Translation: they were already abandoning ship. Kyle poured himself another scotch and stared at the document Lysandra had given him. He'd read it 17 times. The legalese didn't change. 40% of everything he'd built belonged to the Vale Syndicate, had always belonged to them. The shell corporations he thought he'd created had been quietly funded by Vale money from day one. The shipping contracts he'd negotiated had been greased by Vale connections. The doors that opened so easily had been unlocked by a family name he hadn't even known his wife possessed. 10 years of work, all of it built on a foundation he'd never owned. His phone buzzed. Celine. He let it go to voicemail. She called again immediately. He answered this time. "What? We need to talk." Her voice was tight, professional. The warmth she'd shown him earlier was completely gone. "My people are saying the Volkovs are pulling out of the northern expansion. Dmitri won't return calls. The senator's office is being cagey. And Marcus Chen's assistant said he's reconsidering his position on joint ventures." "I know." "So what's the plan?" Kale laughed bitterly. "The plan? Celine, there is no plan. My wife—" He stopped. "My ex-wife owns 40% of everything I've spent a decade building. Every ally I have is about to become her ally. Every door that was open to me is about to close. What exactly would you like me to plan?" Silence on the other end. Then, "You're giving up." "I'm being realistic." "Kyle, listen to me carefully. I didn't spend 6 months positioning myself as your partner just to watch you roll over because your wife turned out to be more connected than anyone realized." Celine's voice sharpened. "You still control 60% of the empire. That's not nothing. We regroup. We consolidate what we have. There is no we." "Excuse me? You heard me. There's no we. There never was. You wanted access to my connections and I wanted—" He stopped. What had he wanted? Validation? Someone who made him feel powerful? Someone who wasn't Lysandra with her quiet disappointment and careful distance? "I see." Celine's voice went flat. "So I'm being dismissed." "Consider it a strategic repositioning." She laughed, cold and sharp. "You're pathetic. Your wife played you for 8 years and you never even noticed. And now that she's taken her toys back, you're just going to sulk in your expensive apartment and pretend you were never really trying anyway." A pause. "Good luck with that." She hung up. Kale threw his phone across the room. It hit the wall and shattered into expensive pieces. He sat in the dark and tried to remember when everything had started falling apart. The answer came immediately. Tonight, when Lysandra had walked into the ballroom wearing black and confidence and the kind of power he'd spent 10 years pretending he possessed. No. Earlier than that. 8 years ago, when he'd married a woman named Lysandra Vale and convinced himself the last name didn't matter. His office door opened without warning. Richard Kane stepped inside. Kael's head of security. Former military. The kind of man who made problems disappear with frightening efficiency. "We need to talk," Richard said. "Join the club." Richard closed the door carefully. "I just got a call from Marcus Lau." Kyle looked up. "Who?" "Marcus Lau, head of security for the Vale Syndicate." Something cold slid down Kyle's spine. "What did he want?" "To inform me that you have 48 hours to vacate any properties that were purchased using Vale funding. That includes this penthouse, the summer house in the Hamptons, the office building downtown, and approximately 60% of your primary residence." Kale stood slowly. "He can't do that." "Actually, he can. The deeds are complicated. Shell corporations layered on shell corporations. But if you dig deep enough, they all lead back to Vale Holdings. Your wife has been very patient, very thorough. Richard's expression didn't change. And very smart. How long have you known? About the Vale connection? About 6 months. After you started seeing Celine Marrow more publicly, I did some digging, wanted to make sure there weren't any skeletons that could come back to haunt you. Richard pulled out a file folder and dropped it on the desk. Turns out the skeletons were attached to your wife the entire time. Cale opened the folder slowly. Inside were photographs, surveillance logs, financial records, a complete dossier on Lysandra Vale and the family she'd kept hidden for a decade. There was her father, Jonah Vale, shot 3 times outside the Harbor warehouse in 2016, suspected of controlling everything from drug trafficking to political corruption to contract killings. Never convicted, too smart, too connected, too dangerous. There was her mother, Catherine Vale. Died in a car accident that definitely wasn't an accident. Rumors said it was retribution from a rival family. Other rumors said Jonah had arranged it himself when she'd tried to leave. There were financial documents showing the Vale syndicate's reach. Shipping, real estate, construction, political campaigns. Everything legitimate on the surface. Everything corrupt underneath. And there, in the center of it all, was Lysandra, the sole surviving heir. The daughter who had disappeared 10 years ago and spent the last decade pretending to be someone else. Cale looked up at Richard. You knew, for 6 months, and you didn't tell me. I tried. You weren't interested in listening. You were too busy proving to everyone that Celine Marrow understood ambition better than your wife. Richard's voice carried no judgment, just facts. I told you surveillance showed your wife meeting with Cassian Drakov multiple times. You said she was probably having an affair, and to leave it alone. I told you some of your shell corporations had unusual funding sources. You said as long as the money was clean, you didn't care where it came from. Jesus Christ. I'm head of security, not head of marriage counseling. My job was to inform you of potential threats. Your job was to take them seriously. Richard picked up the folder. Consider this my resignation. Marcus Lau made it very clear that anyone currently in your employ has 24 hours to choose a side. I've chosen mine. You're going to work for Lysandra. I'm going to work for the Vale Syndicate. There's a difference. Richard paused at the door. For what it's worth, I liked your wife. She was always polite, always remembered my daughter's name, asked about her college applications. That's more than you ever did. He walked out. Cale stood alone in his office, listening to phones ring with calls he wouldn't answer from people who didn't matter anymore. Outside the windows, the city glittered with lights that suddenly felt very far away. That's somebody. At the Vale estate, Lysandra was learning exactly how much work running a criminal empire actually required. The family room had transformed into something resembling a war room. Laptops open, documents spread across every surface, people on phones negotiating deals in 3 different languages. Elena was coordinating shipping routes. James was restructuring the financial architecture to route everything through Lysandra's control. Marcus was dealing with the security implications of the sudden power shift. And Vincent was methodically destroying what remained of Kyle Varelli's empire with the efficiency of a man who had been waiting 10 years to do exactly this. The Volkovs confirmed, he said, hanging up his phone. They're formally requesting a meeting with you next week to discuss the Northern Territories. Dmitri wants to renegotiate the terms Kyle offered, says he's willing to be significantly more generous now that he knows who he's actually doing business with. Lysandra nodded. She was exhausted. The adrenaline from the ballroom confrontation had faded hours ago, leaving behind the kind of bone-deep weariness that came from pretending to be strong when you felt like shattering. Cassian appeared beside her with coffee. Black. No sugar. Exactly how she'd always taken it. You need to sleep, he said quietly. I need to finish this. Lysandra, see? I need to finish this. He studied her for a moment. Then he turned to the room. Everyone out. We'll reconvene at 8 a.m. Elena looked up sharply. We're in the middle of 8 a.m., Cassian repeated. His voice didn't rise, didn't need to. Out. One by one, they filed out. Vincent went last, pausing at the door. He's right. You look like you're about to collapse, and we need you functional more than we need you heroic. The door closed. Lysandra and Cassian were alone for the first time since they'd left the ballroom. The silence felt enormous. "I'm scared," Lysandra said finally. Cassian set his coffee down carefully. "Of what?" "All of it. Becoming my father. Becoming my mother. Turning into the kind of person who makes decisions that get people killed." She looked at him. "I walked away from this world for a reason, Cassian. It destroys everything it touches." "So why come back?" "Because being destroyed slowly by invisibility was worse." She laughed, but it sounded broken. "At least this way I'm visible while I'm being destroyed." Cassian crossed the room until he stood directly in front of her, close enough that she could see the scar above his left eyebrow, close enough to smell leather and rain and something darker she'd never been able to name. "You're not your father," he said quietly, "and you're not your mother. You're Lysandra Vale, and you get to decide what that means." "What if I decide it means something terrible? Then I'll still be standing here." His hand came up slowly and cupped her face with a gentleness that seemed impossible from someone so dangerous. "I've loved you since before you knew what love cost. I've loved you through marriage to someone else. Through 8 years of watching you pretend to be someone smaller than you are. I'll love you through whatever comes next, even if it's terrible." Lysandra's breath caught. "Cassian, but I need you to understand something." His thumb traced her cheekbone. "If you do this, if you take over the syndicate, there's no walking away again. The families that killed your father are still out there. The enemies he made are now your enemies, and they will come for you eventually." "I know." "And you're still doing this?" "Yes." "Why?" She thought about Kael's face when he'd told her she was too invisible for his world. She thought about 8 years of shrinking. She thought about the woman in the mirror tonight who had finally looked familiar. "Because I'd rather die visible than live invisible," she said simply. Cassian smiled, sad and proud and terrified all at once. "Then we'd better make sure you don't die at all." He kissed her, not carefully, not tentatively, like a man who had been waiting 8 years for permission and had finally stopped asking for it. Lysandra kissed him back with the desperate hunger of someone who had been pretending not to want something for so long she'd almost convinced herself it was true. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathing hard. "We shouldn't," Lysandra started. "Probably not. The divorce isn't even... I don't care." "Cassian, I have waited 8 years," he said roughly. "I have stood in shadows and watched you smile at a man who didn't deserve you and kept my mouth shut because you asked me to. I'm done waiting. I'm done pretending. Either you want this or you don't. But I need to know now." Lysandra looked at him. This man who had protected her when protection meant staying invisible. This man who had loved her silently while she belonged to someone else. This man who was offering her something Kael had never managed to give her in 8 years of marriage. Truth. "I want this," she whispered. Cassian's smile was fierce and beautiful and terrifying. "Good, because I'm not letting you go again." He kissed her again, and this time Lysandra let herself fall into it completely. Let herself forget about empires and vengeance and all the terrible decisions waiting for her in the morning. Let herself just be Lysandra and Cassian instead of the heir and the enforcer, just for tonight. Tomorrow she would become whoever she needed to become to survive this world. But tonight, she was just a woman who had finally stopped running from the truth. Death. Morning arrived with gray light and the smell of coffee. Lysandra woke alone in her childhood bedroom with no memory of how she'd gotten there. The last thing she remembered was Cassian's hands in her hair and the feeling of finally being seen completely by someone who knew every terrible truth about her family and loved her anyway. She showered, dressed in black pants and a white silk shirt that looked professional and felt like armor. Pulled her hair back severely. No makeup except dark lips. When she walked downstairs, the family room was already full. Vincent, Elena, Marcus, James, 6 others whose names she was still learning. They looked up when she entered and something in the room shifted. Yesterday they had been skeptical. Today they looked almost eager. Word had spread overnight. The Vale heir had returned, and she wasn't leaving. "Status," Lysandra said, taking her seat at the head of the table. Vincent smiled. Kael Varelli's lawyers called at 6 a.m. requesting a meeting. They want to negotiate the terms of the separation. Tell them no. No, they don't negotiate. We dictate. 40% transfers to Vail Holdings by end of business Friday. Divorce papers signed by Monday. No press, no drama. No attempts to retain control through legal maneuvering. Lysandra's voice was calm, flat. If they don't agree, we move to hostile takeover and make this as public and humiliating as possible. Elena was grinning. I like her. The Volkovs want a meeting next Tuesday, James added. Dmitri specifically requested you attend personally. Accepted. Tell him I'm bringing Cassian. Marcus looked up from his laptop. We've got a problem. The Chen family is making noise. Marcus Chen called this morning, says he wants to discuss protecting mutual interests before any ownership transfers happen. Lysandra's eyes narrowed. What does that mean? It means he's worried about how this power shift affects his steel operations. Kyle gave him favorable shipping rates that technically belong to us. Chen's afraid we're going to renegotiate. We are going to renegotiate. He won't like that. I don't care if he likes it. He does business on our terms or he finds another shipping partner. Lysandra paused. Set up a meeting for this afternoon. His territory, public location. Show him we're not afraid to walk into his space. Vincent raised an eyebrow. You're moving fast. I'm making a point. Everyone needs to understand that the Vail Syndicate isn't asking for permission anymore. We're taking what's ours. The room went quiet. Then Vincent started laughing, low and dark and approving. Your father used to say the same thing, right before he burned an empire to ash and rebuilt it in his own image. Good, Lysandra said. Then I'm doing it right. They spent the next 3 hours mapping strategy. Elena coordinating shipping routes to cut Kyle out completely. James restructuring the financial networks to route everything through Vail accounts. Marcus identifying which of Kyle's security personnel could be turned and which needed to be replaced. It was brutal, efficient, exactly the kind of ruthless consolidation her father would have engineered, and Lysandra felt absolutely nothing while ordering it. That scared her more than anything else. At noon, Cassian appeared in the doorway. Cars ready. Chen's people confirmed the meeting location. Riverside Plaza. Public. Neutral territory. Lysandra stood. Elena, you're with me. Marcus, stay here and coordinate security. Vincent, I want hourly updates on Kyle's lawyer situation. Everyone else, keep working the transitions. I want every shipping contract rerouted by end of day. She walked out of the family room with Cassian and Elena flanking her like bodyguards. The black Bentley was waiting. They drove through the city in silence. Lysandra watched the buildings slide past and tried to remember who she'd been yesterday morning. Kale's quiet wife, the woman who made herself invisible at fundraisers, the person who believed love meant erasing yourself for someone else's ambition. That woman felt like someone she'd read about in a book, not someone she'd actually been. The Riverside Plaza was exactly what its name suggested, a high-end shopping district built along the waterfront where people with too much money bought things they didn't need. The car pulled up in front of Moretti's, an Italian restaurant that served food almost as expensive as the designer stores surrounding it. Marcus Chen was already waiting at an outdoor table wearing a suit that probably cost more than most cars. He stood when Lysandra approached. Ms. Vail, thank you for coming. Let's skip the pleasantries. Lysandra sat without waiting for him to offer. Elena took position behind her right shoulder. Cassian stood to the left. You're worried about shipping rates. Marcus blinked, then smiled thinly. Direct. I appreciate that. Yes, I'm worried about shipping rates. Kale gave me terms that made the steel operation viable. If those terms change significantly, they will change. Then we have a problem. No. Lysandra leaned forward slightly. You have a problem. I have options. There are 6 other steel operations that would love access to our eastern shipping corridors. You're not special. You're just convenient. Marcus's smile disappeared. I've been in business with the Varelli organization for 7 years. You've been in business with the Vail Syndicate for 7 years. You just didn't know it. And now that you do, you have a choice. Accept the new terms, or watch us route every single shipping container through someone else's operation while yours dies slowly from lack of access. That's you. Business, Lysandra finished. That's business. My father built this empire by understanding that loyalty is expensive and sentiment is worthless. Either you're profitable or you're not. Right now, you're barely profitable at the rates Kyle gave you. We'll be offering rates 30% higher. 30%? Marcus actually looked shocked. That will destroy my margins. Then improve your margins. Cut costs somewhere else? Find efficiencies. Or, Lysandra shrugged, find a different shipping partner. I hear the Volkovs are always looking for new steel suppliers. Marcus's jaw tightened. This is extortion. This is capitalism. I own 40% of the corridors. You need the corridors. I'm charging what the market will bear. She stood. You have until Friday to decide. After that, we move on to the next steel operation on our list. She walked away before he could respond. Elena caught up 3 steps later. That was cold. That was necessary. He's going to push back. Maybe try to find allies to leverage against us. Let him try. Lysandra climbed into the Bentley. Everyone needs to understand we're not negotiating anymore. We're dictating. Cassian slid in beside her. You sounded exactly like your father just now. Is that a problem? That depends. Do you want to become your father? Lysandra didn't answer. She didn't know how to. The car pulled away from Riverside Plaza and headed back toward the estate. Outside the windows, the city continued moving. People living normal lives, going to jobs, raising families, existing in a world where empires and syndicate politics were just background noise. Lysandra had tried living in that world for 8 years. It had nearly killed her. But this world, her father's world, would definitely kill her eventually. The only question was how long she could survive before it did. By nightfall, everything was moving too fast to control. Cale's lawyers had rejected the initial terms and proposed a counteroffer that was somehow even more insulting. Vincent was handling it with the kind of vicious efficiency that suggested he was enjoying himself far too much. Marcus Chen had made calls to 3 different families looking for support against the Vale overreach. All 3 families had declined. The Volkovs confirmed Tuesday's meeting and specifically requested Elena attend to discuss shipping logistics. And somewhere in the chaos, Lysandra's phone had started ringing with numbers she didn't recognize. She let them all go to voicemail. Except one. Celine Marrow. Lysandra stared at the name on her screen for 3 rings before answering. Ms. Vale. Celine's voice was smooth, professional. I was hoping we could talk. About what? About Kyle and what happens next. Lysandra walked out onto the terrace overlooking the harbor. The water was dark. The city lights reflected off the surface like scattered jewels. This was where her father had died. Right here. 3 bullets. The kind of professional hit that sent a message to everyone who thought they could challenge Vale territory. I have nothing to say to you, Lysandra said finally. I think you do. I think you're wondering whether I knew. Celine paused. Whether I was working with him or working against him. Whether I'm a threat or just collateral damage. Are you a threat? That depends entirely on what you do next. Lysandra's hand tightened on the phone. Is that supposed to be intimidation? It's supposed to be information. KL is weak, panicking, making mistakes. In 48 hours, he'll be functionally irrelevant, which means everyone who allied with him is suddenly very nervous about where they stand with the Vale Syndicate. Another pause. Including me. You want protection. I want an arrangement. I don't make arrangements with women who sleep with my husband. Ex-husband, almost. And I didn't sleep with him for love. I slept with him because he had connections I needed, just like you married him because you needed cover while you rebuilt your inheritance. Celine's voice sharpened. We're not that different, you and I. We both use men as tools. The difference is, I'm honest about it. Lysandra felt something cold settle into her chest. What do you want, Celine? A meeting. Tomorrow. Neutral location. Just us. No Cassian. No security. Just 2 women who understand that power isn't given. It's taken. Why would I agree to that? Because I have information about who killed your father, and I'm willing to trade it for safe passage out of this mess you've created. The world tilted slightly. Lysandra gripped the terrace railing hard enough that her knuckles went white. You're lying. I'm really not. Tomorrow, 2 p.m. The Harbor Cafe. Come alone or don't come at all. Celine hung up. Lysandra stood on the terrace staring at the dark water while her heart hammered against her ribs. Cassian appeared behind her. Who was that? Celine Marrow. His expression went deadly. What did she want? A meeting. Tomorrow. She says she has information about my father's death. It's a trap. Probably. Then you're not going. Lysandra turned to face him. Yes, I am. Lysandra, if there's even a chance she knows something. Her voice cracked slightly. My father's killers have been walking free for 10 years. The people who put 3 bullets in his chest and left him bleeding out right here, right on this terrace. If Celine knows who they are, then she's using that knowledge as leverage against you. Cassian's voice was hard, flat. This is basic manipulation. She dangles information you desperately want and uses it to position herself as valuable. You walk into that meeting and you give her exactly what she's looking for. Which is what? Proof that you're still the scared 19-year-old girl who ran away after her father died instead of the woman who runs an empire. The words hit like a slap. Lysandra felt something crack inside her chest. I'm going, she said quietly. Then I'm coming with you. She said alone. I don't care what she said. Cassian? No. He grabbed her shoulders, not roughly, but firmly enough that she couldn't look away. You want to know why I've spent 8 years protecting you? Why your father asked me to watch over you even though he knew I was in love with you? Because you're brilliant and terrifying and capable of anything. But you're also reckless when it comes to the people who hurt you. And Celine Marrow knows that. So what am I supposed to do? Ignore her? Yes. Exactly that. You let her stew in whatever information she claims to have. You make her come to you. You don't walk into traps just because someone waves your father's ghost in your face. Lysandra pulled away from him. My father died alone, betrayed by someone in his own organization. For 10 years, nobody has answered for that. Nobody has paid. If there's even a chance, then we investigate properly, with resources, with security, with an actual plan that doesn't involve you walking into an ambush because you're desperate for closure. I'm not desperate. Yes, you are, and so am I. I watched your father die that night. I was 3 minutes too late to stop it. I've spent 10 years trying to figure out who sold him out, and I'm no closer to an answer than I was the night it happened. Cassian's voice went rough. So don't talk to me about desperation. I understand it better than anyone, but I also understand that desperation gets you killed. They stared at each other in the dark while the harbor water lapped at the rocks below. Finally, Lysandra said, If I don't go, she'll disappear, and whatever she knows disappears with her. Then let it disappear. Your father's dead. Revenge won't bring him back. This isn't about revenge. Yes, it is. And revenge is a poison that destroys you from the inside out. I watched it destroy your mother. I won't watch it destroy you. Lysandra turned back to the water, the lights. The city that had belonged to her family for 3 generations and might not belong to them much longer if she made the wrong choice. I'm going, she said finally, with or without you. Cassian stood silent for a long moment. Then, fine, but I'm setting up surveillance. And if anything goes wrong, I'm burning that cafe to the ground with everyone inside it. Noted. He walked back inside. Lysandra remained on the terrace until the cold sank into her bones and made her shiver. Tomorrow, she would walk into Celine Marrow's trap, and she would do it knowing that every choice she made from here forward would either save her empire or destroy it completely. There was no middle ground anymore. No safe option. No way back to the woman she'd been 48 hours ago when her biggest problem had been an unfaithful husband and a loveless marriage. Now her problems involved empires and vengeance, and the kind of violence that followed the Veil name like a shadow. She looked down at the exact spot where her father had fallen. 3 bullets. Professional work. Someone he'd trusted. Lysandra touched the terrace railing where his blood had stained the stone for 3 days before anyone could wash it clean. I'm sorry I ran, she whispered into the darkness, but I'm back now, and whoever killed you is going to pay, even if it destroys me in the process. The harbor wind carried her words away, and somewhere in the dark city, Celine Marrow was setting a trap that would either give Lysandra the answers she'd spent 10 years searching for, or kill her. Either way, tomorrow would be the point of no return. The harbor cafe sat on the waterfront like a postcard pretending to be dangerous. White tablecloths, overpriced wine, Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the marina where boats bobbed in water so clean it looked fake. The kind of place where wealthy people came to feel adventurous by eating fish they could pronounce. Lysandra arrived at 1:53 p.m. wearing black pants and a cream silk blouse that hid the knife strapped to her ribs. Cassian had argued for 2 hours about the weapon, said it made her paranoid. She'd reminded him that paranoid people tended to stay alive longer than trusting ones. He'd conceded the point and handed her a blade thin enough to hide and sharp enough to open arteries. She hadn't asked where he'd gotten it, didn't need to. The cafe was half empty. Lunch crowd mostly gone. Afternoon lull before the dinner reservations started arriving. Lysandra scanned faces automatically, looking for threats, looking for backup, looking for anything that suggested Celine had come with more than conversation. She spotted her at a corner table near the windows. Celine sat with her back to the wall, wearing a burgundy dress that probably cost more than the rent on this entire restaurant. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a severe knot. No jewelry, no visible weapons, just perfectly applied makeup and the kind of cold beauty that made men stupid. Lysandra crossed the room slowly. Every eye in the cafe tracked her movement. She felt them staring, whispering, wondering why two women who looked like they belonged in boardrooms or ballrooms were meeting in a waterfront restaurant like they were negotiating a treaty. They weren't wrong. "Ms. Vale," Celine gestured to the empty chair across from her. "Thank you for coming." Lysandra sat without responding. Celine smiled. "No bodyguard?" "You said come alone. And you actually listened. I'm impressed. Most people in your position would have brought an army. Most people in my position aren't stupid enough to meet with their husband's mistress without backup." Lysandra leaned back in her chair. "But I'm assuming you already have surveillance on me. Probably spotted Cassian 3 blocks away in the black Bentley. Maybe Marcus Lau on the rooftop across the street. Possibly Elena in the kitchen pretending to be a line cook." Celine's smile widened. "You're smarter than Kale ever gave you credit for." "Everyone is smarter than Kale gave them credit for. That's why his empire is currently disintegrating." Lysandra placed both hands flat on the table. "You said you have information about my father's death. Start talking or I'm leaving. Direct. I appreciate that." Celine poured herself wine from the bottle already waiting on the table, offered the second glass to Lysandra. "Drink?" "No. Suit yourself." Celine took a slow sip. "Your father was killed by someone inside his own organization. You already know that. Everyone knows that. Jonah Vale was too careful to be taken down by outside forces. It had to be someone he trusted." "Tell me something I don't know." "The person who sold him out was paid $750,000, wired through 3 shell corporations, and deposited in a Cayman Islands account 48 hours after your father's body was found." Lysandra's heart slammed against her ribs. "How do you know that?" "Because I'm very good at finding information people don't want found. It's what I do. It's what makes me valuable." Celine set her wine glass down carefully. "The shell corporations were owned by the Moretti family, Philadelphia operation. Your father was expanding into their territory. They didn't appreciate it, so they bought someone on the inside and eliminated the problem." "Who?" "That's the interesting part." Celine pulled a folded piece of paper from her purse and slid it across the table. "The account belonged to a man named Vincent Cross." The world stopped. Lysandra stared at the paper like it was covered in blood instead of ink. Vincent Cross. Her father's lawyer, his oldest friend, the man who had welcomed her home 2 nights ago. The man who had spent 10 years running the Vale Syndicate in her absence. The man she had trusted without question. "You're lying," Lysandra said. Her voice sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else. "I wish I was. But the paper trail doesn't lie. $750,000. Deposited 48 hours after your father died. Vincent Cross has been living very comfortably on Moretti money for the last decade while pretending to protect your family's interests." Lysandra's hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against the table to hide it. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because Vincent Cross is about to betray you the same way he betrayed your father. And I'd prefer you survive long enough to be useful." "Useful to who?" "To me." Celine leaned forward. "I don't work for Kyle. I never did. I work for myself. And I've spent the last 6 months positioning myself to take over the northern shipping corridors, regardless of whether Kyle kept his empire or lost it. Your return was unexpected, but not necessarily unwelcome. You want an alliance. I want mutually beneficial cooperation. You have Vale connections. I have Northern Territory infrastructure. Together, we could control everything from Boston to Philadelphia. Separately, we're both vulnerable to families who don't want either of us in power. Lysandra's mind was racing. Vincent. Vincent had killed her father. Vincent had welcomed her home. Vincent had been sitting at the head of her strategy meetings for 2 days while planning. What? What had he been planning? You're asking me to trust you, Lysandra said slowly. After you slept with my husband. After you showed up at the Dominion Ball on his arm specifically to humiliate me. I'm asking you to be pragmatic. Your marriage was already dead. I was just the visible symptom. And if I hadn't pushed Kyle to publicly disrespect you, you might have spent another 8 years playing the invisible wife while he collected power you were too scared to claim yourself. Celine's eyes were cold, hard. I did you a favor. You're welcome. A favor. Yes, a favor. Now I'm doing you another one. Vincent Cross is planning to kill you, probably within the next 48 hours. The Morettis paid him once to eliminate a Vale heir. They'll pay him again. You need to move first or you won't survive the week. Lysandra stood abruptly. The chair scraped against the floor loud enough to make nearby diners flinch. I need proof. The financial records are proof. I need something Vincent can't explain away. Something that proves intent. Not just suspicious transactions from a decade ago. Celine studied her for a long moment. Then she pulled out her phone and tapped the screen several times. Check your email. I just sent you an audio file. Recorded 3 nights ago. Vincent talking to someone with a Philadelphia accent about cleaning up loose ends now that the Vale daughter has returned. He doesn't use names, but the context is pretty clear. Lysandra's phone buzzed in her pocket. She didn't reach for it. Not yet. Not while Celine was watching. Why are you doing this? Lysandra asked quietly. Really? What do you get out of saving me? An ally who owes me. An insurance against the Morettis coming after me next. Vincent won't stop with you. Once he eliminates the last Vale heir, he'll consolidate power and cut out anyone he doesn't need, including consultants from the Northern Territories who got too close to his operation. You're scared. I'm practical, there's a difference. Celine stood and dropped cash on the table for the wine. You have a choice. Trust me and survive. Or trust Vincent and die. I'd suggest making that choice quickly. She walked out without looking back. Lysandra stood alone at the table while her heart hammered and her hands shook and her mind tried to process information that felt like swallowing broken glass. Vincent. Vincent had killed her father. Vincent. She pulled out her phone with numb fingers and opened her email. The audio file was there. Subject line, insurance. She hit play. Vincent's voice filled her ear. Unmistakable. That gravelly tone she'd heard her entire life. Her father's closest friend. The man who used to give her chocolate when she scraped her knees as a child. Situation is contained for now, but the daughter is asking questions. Smart questions. If she keeps digging, she'll find the Cayman account eventually. Another voice. Male. Thick Philadelphia accent. So handle it. That's what we paid you for. Handling Jonah was easy. He trusted me. Lysandra is more careful. She has Drakov watching her back. And Drakov is not someone you eliminate quietly. Then eliminate her first. Make it look like the Volkovs. Or the Chens. Someone with motive. We'll provide the resources. A long pause. Then Vincent. It needs to be soon. Before she consolidates power. Before the other families commit. Right now, she's vulnerable. A week from now, she won't be. How soon? 48 hours. The audio cut off. Lysandra stood in the middle of the harbor cafe while the world tilted and her stomach tried to climb out of her throat. 48 hours. 2 days. Vincent was going to kill her in 2 days. She walked out of this cafe in a daze. The sunlight felt too bright. The air tasted like metal. Everything seemed distant and sharp at the same time. The black Bentley pulled up immediately. Cassian climbed out, looking murderous. What happened? Lysandra handed him her phone without speaking. He listened to the audio file twice. His expression went from concern to deadly somewhere during the second playthrough. "Vincent," he said flatly. "Yes." "Vincent killed your father." "Yes." "And now he's planning to kill you." "Yes." Cassian's hands clenched into fists. "Get in the car. Now." They drove in silence for 3 blocks before Lysandra finally spoke. "Did you know?" "No." "But you suspected." Cassian's jaw worked. "I suspected someone inside the organization. Vincent was on the list. But so were 8 other people who had access to your father's schedule that night. I couldn't prove anything. Still can't. Not definitively. Financial records from a decade ago and an audio recording where he never says your name aren't enough to bring to the other families. They'll demand more. Then we get more. How? By making him think he's won, by giving him an opportunity to move against me, and catching him in the act." Cassian turned to look at her. "You want to use yourself as bait. I want to end this. Vincent has spent 10 years pretending to protect my family while actively destroying it. He welcomed me home so he could kill me in the same house where my father died. I want him to pay for that." Lysandra, don't. Her voice cracked slightly. "Don't tell me it's too dangerous. Don't tell me I'm being reckless. I know what I'm doing, and I know the cost, but I need this. I need to look Vincent in the eye and watch him realize I know, that I've always known, that he never fooled me for a second. Except he did fool you. He fooled both of us. For 10 years. The truth of that hit like a fist to the sternum. Lysandra looked out the window at the city sliding past. Her city. Her father's city. The city Vincent had helped steal from her family while pretending to protect it. "How do we do this?" she asked finally. Cassian was quiet for a long moment. "We tell Vincent you're meeting with the Morettis tomorrow night. Private location. Just you and Elena, to discuss northern expansion and negotiate peace. Vincent will know that if you make peace with the Morettis, his leverage disappears. He'll have to move fast, sloppy. And then? Then we set a trap. Let him think he's walking into an easy kill, and we end him before he ends you." "What about the others? Elena? Marcus? James? How many of them are working with Vincent?" "I don't know. But we can't trust any of them until this is over. It's just you and me now." Lysandra felt something cold and final settle into her chest. She had spent 2 days building alliances with people who had served her father, learning their names, earning their respect, trying to prove she deserved to lead the Vale Syndicate. And now she had to assume they were all complicit in her father's death until proven otherwise. The Bentley pulled up to the Vale estate. Everything looked the same as it had this morning. The iron gates, the circular driveway, the mansion rising from the darkness like a monument to old violence. But nothing felt the same. This wasn't her home. This was the place where Vincent Cross had been waiting to kill her since the moment she'd walked through the door. Lysandra climbed out of the car and walked up the steps with Cassian at her side. She could feel eyes watching from the windows, people inside tracking her movement, reporting back to Vincent probably, letting him know she'd returned from the meeting with Celine. She pushed open the front doors. The main hall was empty, but she could hear voices from the family room, Vincent's gravel tone, Elena's sharp laugh, Marcus discussing security protocols, the sound of people who believed they were winning. Lysandra walked toward the family room with her spine straight and her face calm and her heart screaming inside her chest. Vincent looked up when she entered. His expression was pleasant, concerned. "How did it go with Celine Marrow?" "Interesting," Lysandra said carefully. "She wants an alliance. Says we could control the northern territories together if we cooperate." Vincent's eyes narrowed slightly. "What did you tell her?" "That I'd consider it. But first I need to handle the Moretti situation. If they're going to be a problem, I want to address it before moving forward with any new partnerships." Silence in the room. Then Elena. "The Morettis? They've been quiet for years. Why would they suddenly be a problem?" "Because I'm consolidating territory their operation used to control. And because they have a history of eliminating Vale heirs who get too ambitious." Lysandra met Vincent's eyes. "My father was expanding into Philadelphia when he died. I'm doing the same thing. I'd be stupid not to expect them to respond the same way." Vincent's expression was unreadable. What are you proposing? A meeting. Tomorrow night. Private location. Just me and Elena. Sit down with whoever runs the Moretti operation now and negotiate terms. Find out if they're willing to coexist or if we're heading toward war. That's extremely dangerous. Everything we do is dangerous, but I'd rather walk into a negotiation from a position of strength than wait for them to move first. Vincent studied her for a long moment. She could practically see his mind working, calculating, weighing options. If Lysandra made peace with the Morettis, his leverage disappeared. The family paying him to eliminate Vale heirs would have no reason to protect him. He'd be exposed. He had to move now, tonight or tomorrow, before she could consolidate too much power, before Cassian figured out what Vincent had done, before the trap closed around him. I think that's wise, Vincent said finally. Set up the meeting. I'll coordinate security. Make sure you're protected. Thank you. Lysandra turned to leave. Vincent's voice stopped her. Lysandra, your father would be proud of you. The way you've stepped into this role, the way you're handling threats. You're more like him than I think you realize. She looked back at him. This man who had killed her father. This man who was planning to kill her. This man who stood in her family home and lied with the ease of someone who had been doing it for years. I hope so, she said quietly. Then she walked out before her hands started shaking. Midnight arrived with the sound of footsteps in the hallway outside her bedroom. Lysandra was awake, had been awake for hours. Lying in the dark with the knife Cassian had given her pressed against her ribs and her phone clutched in one hand. The footsteps stopped outside her door. She held her breath. Seconds stretched into minutes. Then the footsteps continued past, heading toward the east wing, toward the study where her father used to work, where Vincent had his office now. Lysandra waited 5 minutes. Then she slipped out of bed wearing black pants and a dark shirt, grabbed her phone, checked that the knife was secure, moved toward the door with footsteps so quiet they barely registered. The hallway was dark, empty. She could see light beneath the study door at the far end. Vincent was inside, probably making calls, coordinating tomorrow's ambush, telling the Morettis exactly where Lysandra would be and when. She moved closer, silent, careful, until she was pressed against the wall beside the door. Vincent's voice filtered through. On the phone, speaking quietly. Confirmed. Tomorrow night. Harbor Warehouse District, Building 7. She'll have Elena with her, maybe Cassian, as backup. But she's being careless, believes she can negotiate with you, doesn't realize it's a trap. A pause. Yes. Clean. Make it look like the Volkovs. I'll provide evidence afterward tying them to the scene. The other families will believe the Volkovs are making a play for Vale territory. It'll destabilize the entire eastern seaboard. Give your people time to move in and consolidate. Another pause. The payment needs to be immediate this time. I've waited 10 years for the second installment. Once the daughter is gone, I want my money. Then I disappear. Retire somewhere warm. Leave this business behind entirely. Lysandra felt bile rise in her throat. Vincent wasn't just planning to kill her. He was planning to frame the Volkovs and ignite a war that would destroy every alliance her family had built. And he'd been planning it since the moment she walked back into his life. She pulled out her phone and started recording. Vincent kept talking. Details about the ambush, how many shooters, what caliber weapons, how they'd dispose of the bodies, where he'd be during all of it, creating plausible deniability. Everything. Every single word. Evidence that would bury him. Lysandra recorded for 6 minutes before Vincent finally ended the call. She moved away from the door, fast, silent, back toward her bedroom before he could emerge and find her listening. She made it 3 steps. The study door opened. Vincent stood backlit in the doorway, looking directly at her. For one terrible second, neither of them moved. Then Vincent's expression shifted from surprise to something that looked almost like resignation. "How much did you hear?" he asked quietly. Lysandra's hand moved toward the knife at her ribs. Vincent raised both hands. "I'm not going to hurt you. Not here, not now. Just tomorrow night in a warehouse while your Moretti friends put bullets in my chest. You were supposed to be asleep. I was supposed to be a lot of things. Quiet. Invisible. Dead." Lysandra's voice was shaking. "Just like my father." Vincent's face went carefully blank. Your father was a complicated man. My father trusted you, and you sold him out for $750,000 and a comfortable retirement. He was expanding too fast, making enemies faster than he could consolidate power. The Morettis weren't going to let him take Philadelphia without a fight. It was only a matter of time before you decided to speed up the timeline and collect a payday. Vincent sighed. I didn't want it to be like this. I hoped you'd stay gone. Stay hidden. Live whatever life you'd built with Kyle Varelli and forget about the family business. But you came back, and now you're asking the same questions your father asked, making the same expansion plans, the same mistakes. The only mistake I made was trusting you. No. Vincent's voice hardened. Your mistake was thinking you could walk back into this world after 10 years and everyone would simply bow down because your last name is Vale. This business doesn't work that way. It belongs to whoever is strong enough to hold it, and you're not strong enough. Lysandra felt the phone still recording in her left hand, felt the knife pressing against her ribs, felt Cassian somewhere in the dark mansion, hopefully hearing this conversation through whatever surveillance he'd set up. You're going to kill me, she said flatly. I'm going to give you a choice. Walk away. Tonight. Disappear again. I'll wire you $5 million. Enough to start over somewhere far from here. You leave and I'll make sure nobody comes looking for you. The Vale Syndicate dies with your father. Everyone moves on. And if I don't walk away? Then tomorrow night you die in a warehouse and I make sure the Volkovs take the blame. Either way, this ends. But one option lets you live. Lysandra looked at him. This man she'd known her entire life. This man who had given her candy and taught her how to play chess and held her hand at her father's funeral while secretly counting the money he'd earned by putting him in the ground. I'm not leaving, she said quietly. Vincent's expression shifted to something like regret. Then I'm sorry. I genuinely am. You're so much like your father, smart, stubborn, too proud to know when you've lost. I haven't lost yet. Yes, you have. You just don't know it. He pulled a gun from behind his back. Not quickly, not aggressively, just smooth and practiced and terrifyingly calm. Lysandra's hand closed around the knife at her ribs. Too slow. Vincent would shoot her before she could draw it, before she could scream, before Cassian could reach her. She was going to die in this hallway, just like her father had died on the terrace, betrayed by someone they trusted. The gun rose slowly toward her chest. Then the lights went out. Complete darkness. The emergency generators didn't kick in. The backup system stayed silent. Everything in the entire estate went dead simultaneously. Cassian. He'd cut the power. Lysandra dropped and rolled left as the gunshot exploded in the darkness. The bullet hit the wall where she'd been standing and embedded in expensive wood paneling. She yanked the knife free and ran. Not toward her bedroom, not toward the stairs. Toward the servant corridors her mother had shown her when she was 8 years old. Hidden passages between walls that let staff move through the mansion without being seen. Behind her, Vincent shouted something. Footsteps pounded. Another gunshot shattered a picture frame somewhere to her right. Lysandra found the hidden door panel and slammed her palm against it. The door popped open. She threw herself inside and pulled it shut behind her just as Vincent reached the spot where she'd been standing. She heard him cursing, heard him searching, heard him realize she'd disappeared into the walls. She ran through absolute darkness with one hand trailing the wall and the other clutching the knife that now had blood on it from where she'd cut her own palm, pulling it free. The passage twisted, turned, descended toward the basement level where wine cellars and storage rooms and her father's old panic room waited. Lysandra's phone vibrated in her pocket. Cassian. She pulled it out. The screen glow was blinding after the darkness. Text message, basement exit, east side, 2 minutes. She typed back. Vincent has a gun. I know, move fast. Lysandra shoved the phone back in her pocket and ran faster. Her lungs burned. Her palm throbbed where the knife had cut it. Her heart felt like it was trying to break through her ribs. She hit the basement level and emerged from the servant passage into the wine cellar. Dark, cold. Racks of expensive bottles her father had collected over decades. The east exit was 50 feet ahead through the storage rooms. She could see weak moonlight filtering through the high windows. Almost there. Behind her, somewhere in the hidden passages, she heard the panel door slam open. Vincent had found the entrance. He was coming. Lysandra ran for the exit with everything she had, crashed through the storage room door, saw the exterior door ahead, saw freedom, saw Cassian's silhouette waiting. 20 feet, 10 feet, 5. The gunshot was impossibly loud in the enclosed space. Lysandra felt something punch into her left shoulder. Not pain, not yet, just impact. Force that spun her sideways and sent her stumbling into a shelf full of storage boxes. She hit the ground hard. The knife skittered away across concrete. Vincent stepped out of the shadows with his gun raised and his expression empty. "I told you," he said quietly. "You're not strong enough." Lysandra tried to stand. Her left arm wouldn't cooperate. Blood was spreading across her shirt. Too much blood. Too fast. Vincent aimed at her chest. "I'm sorry," he said again. Then Cassian shot him. Once. Center mass. The kind of shot that drops a person instantly. Vincent's eyes went wide. He looked down at his chest where blood was already blooming, looked back up at Lysandra, opened his mouth to say something, then collapsed. Cassian was beside Lysandra immediately, pressing his hands against her shoulder, talking on his phone, calling for medical support. His voice was steady, but his hands were shaking. "Stay with me," he was saying. "Lysandra, stay with me. Help is coming. You're going to be fine. Just stay with me." Lysandra stared up at the basement ceiling while her blood spread across concrete that had probably seen blood before. Her father's blood. Her family's blood. Generations of veil violence soaking into foundations that couldn't absorb anymore. "Vincent," she managed. "He's dead. The recording. We have it. Everything. He confessed to all of it. The others, Elena, Marcus, how many? We'll figure it out. Right now I need you to stay conscious. Can you do that? Can you stay with me?" Lysandra looked at him. This man who had loved her silently for 8 years. This man who had just saved her life by killing someone he'd known for 20 years. "Cassian," she whispered, "I'm scared." "I know. Me too. But you're not dying tonight. I won't let you." She wanted to believe him, wanted to believe she could survive this. But as the darkness started creeping in from the edges of her vision, as the pain finally arrived in screaming waves that made her gasp, as blood kept pumping out of her shoulder faster than Cassian's hands could stop it, Lysandra realized she might not get a choice. The Veil Syndicate had taken everything from her. Her father, her childhood, her chance at a normal life, and now it was trying to take her life too. The last thing she heard before unconsciousness took her was Cassian's voice breaking as he begged her to stay. And the last thing she thought was that she'd spent 10 years running from this moment. But there was nowhere left to run anymore. Lysandra woke to fluorescent lights and the smell of antiseptic. Hospital, private room, machines beeping steady rhythms that meant her heart was still beating. Her left shoulder was wrapped in bandages tight enough to make breathing difficult. An IV dripped clear fluid into her right arm. Pain medication that wasn't quite strong enough to stop the fire spreading through her entire upper body. Cassian sat in the chair beside her bed, looking like he hadn't slept in days. He probably hadn't. "How long?" Her voice came out raw, destroyed. 36 hours. You lost a lot of blood. They had to repair the artery. Said another 2 minutes and you wouldn't have made it." Cassian's hand found hers carefully. "You scared the hell out of me." "Vincent?" "Dead. Confirmed. Marcus and Elena burned his body. Traditional Veil send-off for traitors. No funeral, no grave. Just ash scattered in the harbor where your father died." Lysandra closed her eyes, tried to feel something about Vincent's death. Relief, satisfaction, anything. She felt nothing, just emptiness where betrayal used to live. "The others?" she asked. "How many were working with him?" "None of them. We went through everyone's financials, communications, everything. Vincent was working alone. He kept the Moretti connection completely isolated, didn't trust anyone else with the information." Cassian's grip tightened on her hand. "Elena is furious she didn't see it. Marcus wants to burn Philadelphia to the ground. James has already frozen every account Vincent controlled and rerouted the funds back to Veil Holdings." "And the Morettis?" Cassian's smile was cold. "That's the interesting part. The meeting you set up for tomorrow night, It's still happening, but you're not going. I am. Along with Marcus and 20 of his best people. We're going to deliver Vincent's body to the Morettis and explain very clearly what happens to families who try to kill Vale heirs. That'll start a war? Good. Let it start. Your father spent too many years playing nice with families that didn't respect him. You're going to do it differently, smarter, more brutal. He leaned forward. The eastern seaboard is about to learn what it means when a Vale stops asking for permission and starts taking what's theirs. Lysandra stared at the ceiling. White tiles, acoustic panels, the kind of sterile normalcy that had nothing to do with the world she lived in now. I can't do this from a hospital bed. You're not doing anything for at least a week. Doctor's orders. Cassian, no. His voice went hard, flat. You almost died. You almost died in my arms while I couldn't stop the bleeding fast enough. So you're going to stay in this bed and heal and let the rest of us handle the Moretti situation. When you're strong enough to stand without passing out, we'll talk about what comes next. And if the Morettis don't accept your message, then we make them accept it, violently if necessary. Lysandra looked at him. This man who had loved her silently for 8 years, who had killed Vincent without hesitation to save her, who was now planning to start a war to protect her family's empire. I don't want you to become the thing I'm afraid of becoming, she said quietly. Too late. I've always been that thing. I just hid it better when you were watching. The hospital room door opened. Elena stepped inside, looking exhausted and furious in equal measure. You're awake. Good. We have a problem. What kind of problem? The kind where Kael Varelli just filed an emergency injunction blocking the asset transfer, claims you coerced him into signing the initial documents, says you threatened him, says you used your family connections to intimidate him into giving up 40% of his empire under duress. Lysandra laughed. It hurt. Everything hurt. He's desperate. He's also getting traction. Senator Hargrove is backing him publicly, says there are concerns about organized crime infiltrating legitimate business operations. The Volkovs are staying neutral, which means they're waiting to see who wins before committing. And the Chen family just announced they're suspending all shipping contracts pending clarification of ownership. They're testing me. Yes, everyone is. You got shot. You look weak. Now they're all circling to see if you're actually strong enough to hold what you've claimed or if they can tear pieces off while you're vulnerable. Cassian stood. I'll handle Kael. No. Lysandra tried to sit up, failed, settled for propping herself slightly higher on the pillows. I'll handle Kael. Set up a meeting. Tomorrow. His territory, public location. I want him to see exactly what it looks like when a Vale refuses to back down. You can barely sit up. Then get me something that helps with that. Pain medication, adrenaline, I don't care. But I'm not letting Kael Varelli steal from me twice. Her voice was getting stronger, sharper. He took 8 years of my life. He humiliated me publicly. He chose another woman and made sure everyone watched while he did it. Now he's trying to claim I'm the aggressor? That I'm the one who coerced him? Elena's smile was vicious. So what do you want to do? I want to remind him why he should have been terrified of me from the beginning. The meeting happened at noon the next day in the lobby of Virelli Tower. Kael's building, Kael's territory, surrounded by security and lawyers and enough witnesses that violence would be stupid, which was exactly why Lysandra chose it. She arrived wearing a black suit tailored to hide the bandages beneath. Her left arm was in a sling. Her face was pale. But she walked through those glass doors like she owned the building instead of the man whose name was etched into the marble behind the reception desk. Cassian and Marcus flanked her. Elena walked 3 steps behind. 20 additional security personnel spread throughout the lobby, dressed like normal business professionals, but radiating the kind of danger that made people edge away instinctively. Kael was waiting near the elevators with his lawyer, Richard Thorne. Expensive suit, expensive education. The kind of man who made corporate warfare look civilized. Kael looked terrible. His suit was wrinkled. His hair needed cutting. His eyes had the hollow look of someone who hadn't slept properly in days. This was not the confident billionaire who had walked into the Dominion Ball with Celine Marrow on his arm. This was a man watching his empire collapse in real time. Lysandra. His voice tried for authority. Landed somewhere near desperation. Thank you for coming. You filed an injunction claiming I threatened you. I filed an injunction because you used your family's criminal connections to coerce me into signing documents I didn't fully understand. You understood them perfectly. You just didn't believe I'd actually follow through. Khalil's lawyer stepped forward. Ms. Vale, perhaps we should discuss this in a conference room, away from... He glanced around at the growing crowd of people stopping to stare. Public observation. No. Lysandra remained exactly where she was. Your client made this public when he went to Senator Hargrove and started crying about organized crime. So we're going to resolve it publicly. Right here. Right now. That's highly irregular. Everything about this situation is irregular. Your client married the heir to a criminal empire and spent 8 years benefiting from her connections without asking questions. Now that those connections are visible, he wants to pretend he's a victim. That's not irregular. That's pathetic. Kale flinched. I didn't know who you were. Exactly. You didn't know. You didn't ask. You didn't care. As long as doors opened and deals closed and money flowed, you were perfectly happy to ignore where it was all coming from. Lysandra took a step closer. It hurt. Everything hurt. But she didn't let it show. I gave you everything, KL. My name, my connections, my money, my silence. And you gave me nothing. Not respect, not love, not even basic acknowledgement that I existed beyond being decoration at your fundraisers. That's not... You told me I was too quiet for your world. Too soft. Too invisible. You said another woman understood ambition better than I ever could. Her voice dropped to something cold and sharp. So I'm giving you what you wanted, visibility. The whole city is about to see exactly how ambitious I really am, and how soft I'm not. Kyle looked at his lawyer desperately. Richard, say something. Richard Thorne cleared his throat. Ms. Vale, my client is willing to negotiate a settlement. 20% return to Vale Holdings. He keeps the remaining 20%. You both walk away from the marriage cleanly. No further litigation, no public disputes. 40%. That's not reasonable. Oh, 40% or I prove in open court that every major deal KL closed in the last 8 years was facilitated by Vale Syndicate connections. That every shipping contract, every real estate acquisition, every political favor, all of it traces back to my family's money and my family's power. Lysandra's eyes never left Kyl's face. And when I'm done, everyone will know that Kyle Varelli built his empire on the back of a criminal organization, that he's been laundering syndicate money through legitimate businesses for nearly a decade, that his entire fortune is dirty. Kyle's face went gray. You're bluffing. Am I? Do you want to find out in federal court with cameras recording every word? Do you want to explain to Senator Hargrove how you've been moving Vale money through his campaign funds? Do you want to tell the Volkovs why their shipping deals all routed through accounts I controlled? She smiled. It wasn't kind. Or do you want to sign the papers and walk away with what I'm letting you keep? Silence in the lobby. Everyone was staring now. Recording on phones, whispering into headsets. This was going to be all over the news by tonight. Every word, every threat, every moment of Kyle Varelli's humiliation broadcast for the entire city to witness. Richard Thorne looked at Kyle. We should talk privately. No. Kyle's voice was hollow. She wins. She always wins. Because she's willing to destroy everything if she doesn't get her way. Not everything, Lysandra said quietly. Just you. And only because you gave me no choice. I loved you. No, you didn't. You loved the version of me that didn't challenge you, that made you feel powerful, that disappeared when you needed space and appeared when you needed someone on your arm. She pulled a folded document from her jacket pocket. The movement made her shoulder scream, but she didn't let it show. Sign this. Transfer the 40%, finalize the divorce, and I'll make sure the details of our arrangement stay quiet. Your empire takes a hit, but you survive. Your reputation is damaged, but not destroyed. You get to keep pretending you're a legitimate businessman who just had bad luck with marriage. Kale stared at the papers like they were a death sentence. They were. He took them slowly, read through the terms. Each paragraph was another piece of his empire being carved away, another acknowledgement that everything he'd built belonged to someone else. Where do I sign? He asked finally. Lysandra handed him a pen. Kyle signed. His hand was shaking. When he finished, she took the papers back carefully. The divorce will be finalized by end of week. My lawyers will handle everything. You'll receive your copies. Don't contact me again. Lysandra, don't. Just don't. You had 8 years to see me, to value me, to treat me like an actual person instead of an accessory. You wasted every single one of those years. She turned toward the exit. Cassian and Marcus moved with her. Enjoy whatever's left of your empire, Kael. You earned it. She walked out of Varelli Tower with her head high and her spine straight and her entire left side on fire with pain that was probably tearing the surgical repairs. The moment the car doors closed, she collapsed against the seat. Cassian was beside her immediately. Hospital, now! No, estate. We have work to do. Lysandra, the Volkovs are meeting us tonight. The Morettis need to be handled. Kael just signed away 40% of the eastern shipping corridors, which means everyone is going to be repositioning for advantage. If I go back to the hospital now, I look weak. And weak gets you killed. Marcus turned from the front seat. She's right. Every family on the eastern seaboard is watching. We show weakness now and they'll tear us apart before we can consolidate. She's bleeding through her bandages. Then change the bandages, give her something for the pain. But we can't stop moving. Not now. Not when we're this close. Cassian looked at Lysandra. His expression was furious and terrified in equal measure. You're going to kill yourself. Probably, but I'd rather die taking back what's mine than live knowing I gave up because it hurt too much. He stared at her for a long moment. Then he pulled out his phone and started making calls. Medical supplies, pain medication. Everything needed to keep her functional for the next 12 hours. The Bentley raced through the city toward the Vale estate while Lysandra pressed her right hand against her left shoulder and felt blood seeping through expensive fabric. This was the cost. Power didn't come from negotiation or compromise. It came from being willing to bleed for what you believed you deserved. And Lysandra had spent 8 years refusing to bleed. She was making up for lost time. The Volkov meeting happened at 8 p.m. in a private room at Konstantin's, Russian restaurant, Volkov territory. Neutral ground by tradition, but everyone knew Dmitri controlled the exits and probably had 3 different backup plans if the negotiation went wrong. Lysandra arrived wearing a different black suit with bandages freshly changed and enough painkillers in her system that she could almost forget her shoulder existed. Cassian and Elena flanked her. Marcus stayed outside with 20 armed personnel spread throughout the surrounding blocks. If this went sideways, it would get bloody fast. Dmitri Volkov was already seated when they entered. Massive, silver beard, eyes like a frozen lake. He stood when Lysandra approached and actually smiled. Lysandra Vale, I knew your father, respected him, feared him occasionally. He was a complicated man. Most powerful people are. True, Dmitri gestured to the empty chairs. Please, sit. We have much to discuss. Lysandra sat carefully. Every movement sent pain radiating through her shoulder, despite the medication. Dmitri noticed. His eyes flicked to the sling, back to her face. I heard you were shot. Vincent Cross. Tragic. He served your family for many years. He betrayed my family for many years. There's a difference. Indeed. Dmitri poured vodka into 3 glasses, pushed one toward Lysandra. To fallen enemies. She picked up the glass with her right hand. To fallen enemies. They drank. The vodka burned, cleared her head slightly, reminded her she was alive despite everything trying to kill her. I'll be direct, Dmitri said. The Northern Territories interest me. Kael Varelli promised favorable terms. Now Kael Varelli is no longer in a position to deliver, which means I need to renegotiate with the actual power. You. What terms did Kael offer? 20% commission on all goods moving through your shipping corridors into northern markets, plus exclusive rights to certain specialty items. 40%, Dmitri's eyebrows rose. That's aggressive. That's market rate for controlled access. You want my corridors, you pay for them. Or you find another route. There aren't many left. The Chen family just suspended their operations pending ownership clarification. Marcus Chen is afraid. He'll come back eventually, but it'll be on my terms. Which means you have 2 choices. Accept 40% and guarantee access. Or gamble that someone else will offer better terms while I close every other option. Dmitri studied her. You're very much like your father, stubborn, uncompromising, willing to burn everything to prove a point. I learned from watching him die because he wasn't stubborn enough. Ah, yes. Vincent Cross, the betrayal. Dmitri leaned back. Tell me, do you know who else was involved? The Morettis paid Vincent. But who told them your father would be vulnerable that night? Who gave them his schedule? Lysandra's heart stopped. What are you saying? I'm saying the Morettis aren't smart enough to run that operation alone. They had help. Someone inside your organization who knew your father's movements. Someone who wanted him dead as much as they did. Dmitri's smile was sharp. And that someone is still alive. The room went cold. Cassian moved slightly behind Lysandra's right shoulder. Elena's hand disappeared beneath her jacket. Security outside was probably already moving into position. Who? Lysandra said flatly. That information is worth more than a shipping negotiation. Name your price. 30% commission, plus one favor, to be called in at my discretion within the next year. 40%, no favors, and the information now. You're not in a position to negotiate. Neither are you. You need my corridors more than I need your money. You want access to the eastern seaboard markets without going through Chen or the southern families. I'm your only option. So take the 40% and tell me who helped kill my father, or walk away and explain to your people why you couldn't close the most important territorial deal of the decade. Silence. Dmitri's expression was unreadable. Then he laughed, deep and genuine. Your father would have loved you, absolutely loved you. He always said his daughter was too soft for this business, too kind. He worried about what would happen to his empire when she had to take over. He raised his glass. He was wrong. You're harder than he ever was. The name. 35%. That's my final offer. Take it, or we're done here. Lysandra's mind raced. She needed this information, needed to know who else had betrayed her father. But accepting less than 40% would signal weakness to every other family watching this negotiation. 35% for 3 years. After that, it reverts to standard market rate based on volume. Non-negotiable. Dmitri considered. Acceptable. The name. He leaned forward, voice dropping to barely above a whisper. James Cross. Vincent's younger brother. He gave the Morettis your father's schedule. Got paid $50,000. Significantly less than his brother, but enough to make him complicit. Lysandra felt the world tilt. James. James, who had been restructuring the Veil financial systems for the last 3 days. James, who had access to every account, every asset, every holding. James, who was currently at the estate right now with complete control over the syndicate's money. She stood abruptly, too fast. Her shoulder screamed. She ignored it. We're done here. Have your lawyer send the contract details. Cassian will coordinate shipping access. Where are you going? To finish what I started. She walked out with Cassian and Elena racing to keep up. Hit the car. Marcus was already moving. James Cross, she said. He's at the estate. He's been stealing from us since I got back and nobody noticed because we were too busy watching Vincent. How much? Marcus asked. I don't know. But enough that he's probably planning to disappear tonight. As soon as he heard Vincent was dead and I was in the hospital, he started moving money. The Bentley accelerated through city streets while Cassian made calls. Elena pulled up financial records on her phone. Marcus coordinated security protocols. They reached the Vale estate 23 minutes later. The iron gates were open. That was wrong. The front doors were unlocked. That was worse. Lysandra walked inside with her heart hammering and her right hand wrapped around the gun Cassian had given her before they left the restaurant. The mansion was dark, silent, too silent. They moved through hallways with weapons drawn, checked rooms systematically, found nothing, nobody, until they reached the study. James Cross sat behind the desk with a laptop open and a gun beside his hand. He looked up when they entered. His expression was calm, resigned. I was wondering when you'd figure it out, he said quietly. Lysandra raised her gun. How much did you take? 47 million. Spread across 8 accounts in 3 different countries. More than enough to disappear and never work again. You helped kill my father. No. Vincent killed your father. I just told him when to do it. James leaned back in the chair. Jonah was a monster. You remember him through daughter's eyes, but I worked for him for 15 years. I saw what he did to people who crossed him, to families who didn't pay, to anyone who looked at him wrong. He wasn't a good man, Lysandra. He was a predator in an expensive suit. So you had him murdered. I gave Vincent information. What he did with it was his choice. And the 47 million? Payment for 10 years of loyalty to a family that never appreciated it. Your father paid me a fraction of what I was worth. Vincent promised me 10% of whatever he collected from the Morettis. He lied, gave me 50,000 and told me to be grateful. James's smile was bitter. So I waited, learned the financial systems, found the vulnerabilities. And when you came back and created chaos, I took what I should have been given years ago. Cassian's gun was pointed at James's head. Give me one reason not to kill you right now. Because I already sent the account information to the FBI, along with detailed records of every Veil syndicate operation for the last 10 years. Shipping routes, money laundering schemes, political bribes, contract killings, all of it. If I die, it all goes public. If I disappear, it stays buried. Lysandra felt cold spread through her chest. You're bluffing. Am I? Check your email. I sent you a preview 5 minutes ago, just enough to prove I'm serious. Elena was already on her phone. Her face went pale. He's not bluffing. He sent files, real files, names, dates, financial records, everything. James stood slowly. So, here's what's going to happen. I'm walking out of here, taking my 47 million and disappearing. You let me go because if you don't, every law enforcement agency on the Eastern Seaboard receives enough evidence to bury the Veil Syndicate forever. Your choice. I could kill you anyway, Lysandra said. Take the chance that you're bluffing about the dead man's switch. You could, but you're not stupid, and you're not your father. He would have killed me and dealt with the consequences, but you're still trying to rebuild, still trying to prove you deserve to lead. You can't afford a federal investigation right now. Too many enemies would use it as an excuse to move against you. He was right. Lysandra hated that he was right. But killing James and risking everything her father built being exposed wasn't an option. Not when she was this close to consolidating power. She lowered her gun slowly. James smiled. Smart choice. You have 1 hour to leave the city. After that, every family on the Eastern Seaboard gets your name and face. They'll hunt you for betraying the Veil name, and when they find you, they'll make you beg for death. I'll take my chances. He walked toward the door. Cassian and Marcus moved aside reluctantly. James passed within inches of Lysandra, close enough that she could smell his fear beneath the confidence. At the doorway, he paused. For what it's worth, I'm sorry about your father. He didn't deserve to die like that. But he also didn't deserve the loyalty everyone gave him. Sometimes people get exactly what they've earned. Then he was gone. Lysandra stood in the study, listening to his footsteps fade, listening to the front door close, listening to an engine start and tires on gravel. We need to go after him, Marcus said. No. He betrayed your family. He did exactly what my father would have done in his position. Saw an opportunity, took it, covered his tracks. Lysandra holstered her gun carefully. Let him go. We have bigger problems. What problems? James just proved something I've been afraid of since I came back. The Veil Syndicate is built on fear and violence and corruption so deep it can't be cleaned without destroying everything. And if I keep going down this path, I'm going to become exactly like my father, exactly like the man James just called a monster. Cassian touched her arm gently. Lysandra, I need to sleep. Real sleep. Not passing out from blood loss, not medicated unconsciousness. I need to think. To figure out who I actually want to be instead of who everyone expects me to be. She walked out of the study. Through the halls, up the stairs, to her childhood bedroom that didn't feel like home anymore. Cassian followed but stayed in the doorway. What are you going to do? He asked quietly. I don't know. But I need to decide soon because everyone is waiting to see if I'm strong enough to hold this empire. And right now I'm not sure I want to. Then walk away. I can't. Too many people are counting on me. Too many families are waiting to see if the Veil name still means something. If I walk away now, everything my father built collapses. Everyone who's loyal to this family becomes vulnerable. So you're trapped. Yes, exactly like he was. Exactly like every Vale heir before him. She looked at Cassian. My father spent his whole life building an empire, and it killed him. Made him into someone his own daughter couldn't recognize. Someone his organization had to betray because he was that terrible. You're not him. Not yet. But give me 5 years. Give me 100 impossible choices between being good and being powerful. Let me watch everyone I care about get hurt because I'm not ruthless enough. See how long it takes before I become exactly what I'm afraid of. Cassian crossed the room slowly, pulled her into his arms carefully, held her while she finally let herself break. Then we do it differently, he whispered. We build something different. Not your father's empire, yours. With different rules, different values. That's naive. Maybe, but you're the smartest person I've ever met. If anyone can figure out how to have power without becoming a monster, it's you. Lysandra wanted to believe him. Wanted to believe there was a version of this story where she survived without destroying herself. But right now, bleeding through bandages and exhausted beyond measure and surrounded by enemies who wanted her dead, she couldn't see it. Outside the window, the harbor stretched dark and endless. Somewhere out there, James Cross was disappearing with $47 million and enough information to destroy her family. Somewhere out there, the Morettis were planning retaliation for Vincent's death. Somewhere out there, every syndicate family on the eastern seaboard was waiting to see if Lysandra Vale was strong enough to hold what she'd claimed. And tomorrow, she would have to prove she was. Or die trying. Morning arrived without mercy. Lysandra woke before dawn with her shoulder on fire and her mind already cataloging threats. The Morettis would retaliate for Vincent's death. James Cross was gone with enough evidence to bury her family. KL had signed away his empire, but the humiliation was spreading through social circles like poison. Every syndicate operation on the eastern seaboard was watching to see if she could actually hold what she'd violently claimed. She dressed in darkness. Black suit. No sling despite the surgical staples still holding her shoulder together. Pain was just another form of information now. It told you that you were still breathing. Cassian was waiting when she emerged from her bedroom. His expression said he hadn't slept either. The Morettis sent a message an hour ago, he said quietly. They want a meeting. Tonight. Philadelphia. Their territory. Just you. Obviously a trap. Yes. But if you refuse, every family interprets it as weakness. You'll spend the next decade fighting territorial challenges because everyone believes you're too afraid to face your father's killers directly. Lysandra looked at him. This man who had loved her silently for 8 years, who had killed for her, who was now telling her to walk into certain death because it was the only strategic move left. You think I should go? I think you don't have a choice. His voice was rough, tired. But I'm going with you. Marcus too. And 50 of his best people positioned throughout the city. We make it clear that if they kill you, Philadelphia burns to ash before sunrise. Mutually assured destruction. It's kept empires from collapsing for centuries. No reason to abandon it now. The family room was already full when they walked downstairs. Elena, Marcus. A dozen others whose loyalty Lysandra still wasn't entirely certain of. They looked up when she entered. Some faces showed determination. Others showed the kind of careful neutrality that meant they were waiting to see who survived before committing. Lysandra didn't sit. Standing hurt less than the motion of sitting down. The Morettis want a meeting tonight in Philadelphia, she said. Her voice carried through the room with the flat authority of someone who had stopped asking for permission. They're planning to kill me. We're going to let them think they can. And while they're focused on that, we're hitting every Moretti operation in the city simultaneously. Elena's eyes narrowed. You want to use yourself as bait. I want to end this war before it actually starts. My father spent decades managing threats, negotiating, maintaining balance, and someone still put 3 bullets in his chest because he wasn't ruthless enough when it mattered. Lysandra met each person's eyes in turn. I'm not making that mistake. The Morettis paid Vincent to kill my father. They're planning to kill me, so we're going to destroy them completely. Tonight. No survivors. No mercy. No second chances. Marcus leaned back in his chair. That's a declaration of total war. Yes. Every family on the eastern seaboard will have an opinion about it, Some will support us. Others will see it as overreach. Then they can voice their concerns while we control Philadelphia's ports and shipping infrastructure. Power doesn't come from consensus. It comes from being willing to do what others won't. Silence settled over the room like smoke. Then Elena smiled, cold and sharp. I like this version of you better than the one who married Kael Virelli. That woman doesn't exist anymore. She died in a basement with Vincent's bullet in her shoulder. Lysandra pulled a map from the table and spread it across the surface. Marcus, I need targeting packages for every Moretti operation. Warehouses, safe houses, financial offices, political connections, everything. Elena, coordinate with the Volkovs. Make sure Dmitri knows what's happening and stays neutral. If the Russians decide to intervene, this gets exponentially more complicated. They moved into action immediately. Phones appeared, laptops opened. The room transformed into something resembling a military command center planning an invasion. Cassian pulled Lysandra aside. You're sure about this? No, but I'm doing it anyway. There's no walking this back. Once you hit the Morettis this hard, every family will know exactly what kind of leader you are. Brutal, uncompromising, the kind of person who burns entire cities to prove a point. Good. Let them know. Let everyone know. She looked at him. My father tried being reasonable, tried negotiating, tried building alliances through respect instead of fear, and someone betrayed him anyway. So I'm going to be what he should have been, what this world actually responds to. You're going to become the thing you're afraid of. Probably, but I'll be alive, and my family will be safe. That's all that matters now. Cassian's jaw tightened. For a moment she thought he might argue. Tell her she was wrong. Tell her there was another way. Instead, he said, Then let's make sure you survive long enough to regret it. The drive to Philadelphia took 3 hours. Lysandra sat in the back of the Bentley, watching the city disappear behind them while her shoulder throbbed in rhythm with her heartbeat. She'd taken pain medication before leaving, not enough to dull her reflexes, but enough to keep her functional. Everything was a calculation now. Pain versus clarity, safety versus strategy. Marcus drove with Cassian beside him. Elena followed in a second vehicle with 6 additional security personnel. Behind them, spread throughout the convoy, were 40 more people armed with enough weapons to level a city block. The Moretti meeting was set for 9 p.m. at a warehouse near the river. Industrial district. Abandoned buildings. The kind of place where bodies disappeared without questions. Perfect for an ambush, which was exactly why Lysandra had chosen to show up 2 hours early. They arrived at the warehouse district at 7 p.m. while the sun was still painting the sky orange and gold. Marcus coordinated positioning. 20 people on rooftops with overwatch, 15 in surrounding buildings, 10 held in reserve 3 blocks away. Cassian stayed with Lysandra. They entered the warehouse through a side door Marcus's people had already secured. Inside was exactly what she'd expected. Empty space, concrete floors stained with oil and rust, high windows that let in dusty light, and in the center a single chair facing the main entrance, where they expected her to sit, where they expected to kill her. Lysandra walked to the chair slowly, studied it, the sight lines, the angles, the way every window and door provided perfect firing positions for shooters positioned outside. Professional setup, Cassian observed. They've done this before. My father probably sat in a chair just like this one, thinking he was negotiating, not realizing Vincent had already sold him out. She touched the back of the chair. The metal was cold. I'm not sitting here. Good. Because the second you do, someone puts a bullet through that window. He pointed to the east side. Sniper position, maybe 200 yards, easy shot. So we give them a different target. Marcus appeared from the shadows. Everything's positioned. We've got eyes on 6 Moretti vehicles approaching from the north. ETA 20 minutes. They're early. They want to set up their own ambush before I arrive. Lysandra pulled out her phone. Elena, execute now. Hit everything simultaneously. I want the Morettis getting phone calls about their operations burning while they're trying to kill me. Confirmed. Teams are moving. Lysandra pocketed her phone and looked at the empty chair one more time. Then she walked to the darkest corner of the warehouse and waited. Cassian and Marcus melted into shadows on either side. And outside, the trap began closing from both directions. The Morettis arrived at 7:43 p.m. Lysandra heard vehicles. Doors slamming, footsteps on gravel, voices speaking Italian in low, urgent tones. They were positioning people, setting up their kill shot, making sure everything was perfect before she walked into their carefully constructed execution. She counted at least 8 distinct voices, probably more she couldn't hear. The Morettis had brought significant force. They weren't taking chances. Neither was she. At 7:51 p.m., the first phone call came. One of the Moretti soldiers answered, listened. His expression changed from confident to confused to horrified in about 5 seconds. He started shouting in Italian. More phones rang. More shouting. Lysandra smiled in the darkness. Elena was hitting targets ahead of schedule. The Morettis were just now realizing their entire Philadelphia operation was under simultaneous attack. Warehouses burning, financial offices being raided, safe houses stormed by people who knew exactly where to find them. A man's voice cut through the chaos. Older, authority, speaking English now. What do you mean the waterfront warehouse is on fire? Who's attacking us? Vale people, sir, everywhere. They're hitting everything at once. That's impossible. Lysandra Vale is supposed to be here, in this building. How can she be orchestrating attacks if she's... He stopped. Realization dawning. She's not here, he said slowly. This was never about negotiation. It's a distraction. She wanted us all in one place while her people destroyed our infrastructure. Lysandra stepped out of the shadows. Actually, she said clearly, I'm right here. You were half right. Every gun in the warehouse turned toward her voice. She stood perfectly still in the weak light from the high windows, with her hands visible and empty. Cassian and Marcus remained hidden, but she knew they had firing solutions on every Moretti soldier in the building. The older man stepped forward. Silver hair, expensive suit covered in dust from the warehouse. This was Angelo Moretti, head of the family, the man who had paid Vincent Cross to kill her father. Lysandra Vale, he said, you're either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. Neither. Just tired of waiting for men like you to decide whether I deserve to exist. She took a step forward. Her shoulder was screaming. She ignored it. You paid Vincent Cross $750,000 to kill my father 10 years ago. You helped James Cross feed him information. You orchestrated the entire thing because my father was expanding into your territory and you couldn't compete legitimately. Angelo's expression didn't change. Your father was a predator. He took what he wanted and destroyed anyone who stood in his way. We did what was necessary to survive. And now I'm doing what's necessary. Your operations in Philadelphia are currently being dismantled. Your warehouses are burning. Your financial accounts are being frozen. Your political connections are getting very nervous phone calls about their association with organized crime. By midnight, the Moretti family will effectively cease to exist as a functioning syndicate. You're declaring war. No, I'm ending one. The war started when you killed my father. I'm finishing it. Angelo's hand moved toward his jacket. 6 red laser dots appeared on his chest simultaneously. He froze. I brought 50 people, Lysandra said calmly. They're positioned throughout this district, on rooftops, in buildings, surrounding this warehouse. You brought maybe 15. The math doesn't work in your favor. So this is execution. This is justice. You killed my father. You tried to kill me. Now you get to understand what it costs to wage war against the Vale family. Angelo's jaw tightened. You're just like him. Exactly like Jonah. Ruthless, cold, willing to burn everything to prove you're strong enough. Wrong. I'm worse. My father still believed in rules, in traditions, in the idea that syndicate families could coexist if they respected boundaries. Lysandra's voice went flat, empty. I don't believe in any of that. I believe in power. And I believe that people who try to take what's mine die publicly so everyone else learns from their mistakes. Then do it. Pull the trigger. Become the monster your father tried so hard not to be. Lysandra looked at him. This old man who had orchestrated her father's death, who had tried to kill her, who represented everything wrong with the world she'd been born into. She could kill him. Should kill him. Every strategic calculation said eliminating Angelo Moretti was the smart move. The necessary move. The move that would cement her reputation as someone too dangerous to cross. But standing in this warehouse with guns pointed and lasers painting targets on human beings, Lysandra suddenly understood something her father never had. Power built on fear alone eventually collapsed. Because fear made people desperate, and desperate people did stupid things like paying Vincent Cross to kill Jonah Vale. No, she said quietly. Angelo blinked. What? I'm not killing you. I'm giving you a choice. Walk away from Philadelphia, dismantle your operations, retire, disappear, take your people, and go somewhere the Vale name doesn't reach. Do that and you live. Stay and fight, and by sunrise there won't be enough left of your family to bury. Silence in the warehouse. Then Angelo started laughing, bitter and broken. You think mercy makes you different? Makes you better than your father? No. I think mercy gives you the chance to tell every other family on the eastern seaboard exactly what happens when you come after the Vales. Death is easy. It ends the story. But letting you live? Letting you walk away humiliated and broken while everyone watches? That's the kind of reputation that actually keeps people from trying again. Angelo stared at her. You're more terrifying than your father ever was. Good. Then we understand each other. Lysandra stepped back into shadows. You have until midnight to leave Philadelphia. After that, my people have orders to eliminate anyone still operating under the Moretti name. Choose wisely. She turned and walked toward the exit without waiting for his response. Cassian and Marcus emerged from their positions and flanked her. Behind them, the red laser dots remained fixed on Angelo and his soldiers. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. They reached the side door, stepped into cool night air. Walked to the waiting vehicles while Marcus coordinated the withdrawal. Inside the warehouse, phones started ringing again. The Morettis were learning the full scope of what Lysandra's people had destroyed in the last 40 minutes. Everything. Their entire infrastructure. Gone. Elena was waiting at the vehicles. It's done. Every target hit. 3 small fires that'll burn out. No casualties on our side. The Morettis lost 6 people who tried to fight instead of running. And the accounts? Frozen. James left us detailed financial records before he disappeared. We used them to track every Moretti holding. Their money is locked down tight. They can't access it without triggering federal attention. Lysandra nodded slowly. Her shoulder was bleeding again. She could feel wetness spreading beneath her jacket. The surgical staples had probably torn during the confrontation. We need to get you to a hospital, Cassian said urgently. Not yet. First we finish this. Lysandra? Not yet. The convoy headed back toward the city, while Philadelphia burned behind them in carefully controlled ways. By morning, every syndicate family on the eastern seaboard would know what happened tonight. Would know that Lysandra Vale had walked into a trap, destroyed an entire operation, and let the architects live just to prove she could. Some would call it mercy. Others would call it genius. But everyone would understand the actual message. The Vale Syndicate wasn't asking for respect anymore. It was taking it. Chunk. They reached the estate at 2 a.m. Lysandra made it as far as the front steps before her legs gave out. Cassian caught her before she hit the ground. Hospital. Now. No, just fix the staples. I need to sleep in my own bed. You're delirious from blood loss. Probably, but I'm still making the decisions. She looked up at him through vision that was starting to blur at the edges. Did we win? Yes, completely. Good. Then it was worth it. He carried her inside, up the stairs, to her bedroom where medical supplies were already waiting because Marcus had called ahead. The next hour was pain and stitches, and Cassian's hands working with surprising gentleness to repair damage she'd inflicted on herself by refusing to stay down. You're going to kill yourself, he said while cleaning the wound. Not dramatically, not in some glorious battle, just slowly, by refusing to acknowledge that you're human and humans break when you push them this hard. I'm not human anymore. I'm a Vale. There's a difference. No, there's not. That's what your father believed, that the name made him something other than a man who bled and hurt and made mistakes. It's what got him killed. Lysandra looked at the ceiling while Cassian stitched her shoulder back together. Do you think I did the right thing? Letting Angelo live? I think you did something your father wouldn't have. Whether that's right or wrong depends on what happens next. What do you think happens next? Honestly, I think half the families are going to respect you more for showing restraint, and the other half are going to see it as weakness and test you within 6 months. So I'll still be fighting. You'll always be fighting. That's what this life is. You were born into a war that started before you existed and won't end when you die. The only choice you have is how you fight it. He finished the stitches and bandaged her shoulder with practiced efficiency. There. That'll hold if you stop trying to carry the entire empire on one night's worth of adrenaline. Thank you. For what? For staying. For not walking away when you realized how damaged I actually am. Cassian's hand cupped her face gently. You're not damaged. You're surviving. There's a difference. He kissed her forehead. Get some sleep. Real sleep. I'll be right outside if you need me. Cassian? Yes? I love you. I should have said it 8 years ago. I should have said it instead of marrying Kyle. I should have said it 1,000 times before tonight. But I'm saying it now. I love you. His eyes went bright, wet. I know. I've always known. How? Because I know you. Better than anyone. Better than you know yourself sometimes. He stood slowly. Sleep. We'll figure out the rest tomorrow. He left. Lysandra lay in the darkness, listening to her heartbeat slowly return to normal rhythms. Her shoulder throbbed. Her entire body ached, but underneath the pain was something else. Not peace exactly, but maybe the beginning of it. She closed her eyes and let exhaustion take her. Chegg. Morning came with sunlight and the smell of coffee. Lysandra woke feeling marginally more human. Her shoulder still hurt, but the pain was manageable now. Distant, like it belonged to someone else. She dressed slowly in loose clothing that didn't press against the bandages, made her way downstairs where voices filtered from the family room. The entire organization had gathered. Elena, Marcus. James had been replaced by someone new whose name was Sarah Chen. No relation to Marcus Chen of the steel operation, just unfortunate coincidence. They looked up when she entered. The Morettis left Philadelphia, Elena reported immediately. Every operation shut down. Angelo and his remaining people are headed west, California maybe. Somewhere outside Eastern Seaboard territory, they're done. And the other families? Mixed reactions. The Volkovs are pleased. Dmitri sent a gift, expensive vodka, and a note that said, to new friends and old enemies. Elena smiled. The Chens are nervous. Marcus Chen called this morning asking for a meeting to renegotiate shipping terms. He's willing to accept 40% now. And Senator Hargrove's office released a statement distancing him from Kyle Varelli and expressing interest in productive relationships with all legitimate business interests in the region. Translation, they're all afraid. Yes, exactly as you intended. Lysandra sat down carefully. The motion sent pain radiating through her shoulder, but she kept her expression neutral. And Kyle? Quiet, selling off assets. His lawyer confirmed the divorce will be finalized by end of week. He's essentially disappeared from public view. Good. Let him disappear. Let him spend the rest of his life understanding that he'd had something precious and thrown it away because he couldn't see past his own ego. What about James Cross? Marcus asked. He's still out there with enough evidence to damage us. Let him go, Lysandra said. If he releases the information, we deal with it then. But my guess is he's smart enough to know that dead man switches only work if people believe you'll actually use them. The moment he tries, every family on the Eastern Seaboard will hunt him for being a liability. He'll keep quiet and live comfortably on his $47 million. You're gambling. Everything we do is gambling. The only question is whether the odds are worth it. Cassian appeared in the doorway. There's someone here to see you. Says it's urgent. Who? Celine Marrow. The room went silent. Lysandra looked at Elena, then Marcus, then back at Cassian. Let her in. Celine entered 30 seconds later wearing business casual clothing and the kind of careful neutrality that meant she was operating in enemy territory and knew it. She stopped just inside the doorway, nodded respectfully. Miss Vale, thank you for seeing me. You have 5 minutes. Start talking. I want to propose an alliance, real alliance, not the predatory arrangement I suggested at the Harbor Cafe. Celine's voice was steady, professional. You control the Eastern Seaboard now. I control Northern Territory infrastructure. Together we could create a supply chain that runs from Boston to Philadelphia without any family strong enough to challenge it. Why would I trust you? Because I gave you the information about Vincent when I didn't have to. I could have let you walk into his trap and taken advantage of the chaos afterward. But I didn't. I warned you. Saved your life, probably. Celine paused. I'm pragmatic, not loyal. But I'm smart enough to know that your survival is worth more than whatever short-term advantage I could have gained from your death. Lysandra studied her. This woman who had slept with Kael, who had humiliated her publicly at the Dominion Ball, who was now standing in her family home offering partnership like the past didn't matter. You're asking me to work with my husband's mistress, ex-husband, and yes, I'm asking you to be strategic instead of emotional. I know that's asking a lot, but I'm offering something valuable in return. Legitimate business infrastructure that lets you expand without constant warfare. A way to build power that doesn't require burning cities every time someone challenges you. The room was silent. Everyone waited for Lysandra's response. She thought about her father, how he'd built his empire through violence and intimidation, how he died because someone decided the cost of tolerating him was too high. She thought about Angelo Moretti walking away humiliated but alive. She thought about what Cassian had said. You get to decide what kind of leader you are. 30% commission on northern routes, Lysandra said finally. You provide infrastructure. We provide security and political connections. Quarterly reviews to ensure mutual benefit. And if you ever betray this arrangement, I won't just kill you. I'll destroy everything you've ever built and make sure your name becomes a warning other people tell their children. Celine smiled. That's extremely harsh. That's business. Do we have a deal or not? We have a deal. They shook hands. The grip was firm, professional. Two women who understood that trust was earned through results instead of promises. Celine left. The room exhaled collectively. You're building something different, Elena observed. Not your father's empire. Something new. I'm building something that might actually last, Lysandra corrected. My father's empire died with him. I want mine to survive long after I'm gone. That means alliances instead of threats, strategy instead of just violence, being smart enough to know when fear works and when it doesn't. Marcus nodded slowly. It's going to take time, years probably, changing how everyone sees the Veil name. I have time, and I have all of you. She looked around the table. My father built this empire alone, made decisions alone, trusted almost nobody, and it got him killed. I'm not making that mistake. This is ours now. All of us. We build it together or we don't build it at all. For the first time since she'd returned to the estate, Lysandra saw something other than skepticism in their faces. She saw belief. 3 months later, Lysandra stood on the terrace overlooking the harbor where her father had died. The city stretched out below her, glowing with lights against the evening sky. Somewhere out there, shipping containers moved through corridors she controlled. Political campaigns ran on money she provided. Families made decisions based on what the Veil Syndicate would tolerate. Her empire, not her father's, hers. The shoulder had healed mostly, left a scar that would never completely fade. She touched it sometimes when she needed to remember what survival cost. Cassian appeared beside her with 2 glasses of wine, handed her one. The Volkov contract is finalized, he said. Dmitri signed this morning. We officially control 45% of northern shipping routes. Celine's infrastructure is performing better than projected, and Marcus Chen called to confirm he's accepting the 40% terms without further negotiation. And Kael sold his penthouse, most of his art collection, the summer house. He's living in a smaller apartment downtown, still wealthy by normal standards, but compared to what he had, Cassian shrugged. He's a cautionary tale now. The man who married power and was too stupid to recognize it. Lysandra sipped her wine. It was good, expensive, the kind her father used to drink while making decisions that ruined lives. Do you think I'm becoming him? She asked quietly. My father. No, I think you're becoming yourself, which is more terrifying to your enemies and more inspiring to your allies. Cassian's hand found hers. Your father built an empire through fear. You're building one through strategy and carefully calculated mercy. They're not the same thing. But I'm still building an empire, still making decisions that hurt people, still operating in a world where violence is sometimes the only answer. Yes, but you're also building something that might outlast the violence. Alliances that aren't based purely on fear. Systems that don't require constant warfare to maintain. Your father never figured out how to do that. He squeezed her hand gently. You have. That's the difference. Lysandra looked at the harbor, the dark water. the lights reflecting off the surface like scattered stars. This was where her father had fallen, where she had almost fallen too. But she was still standing, still breathing, still fighting. "I got a letter yesterday," she said, "from Kael." "What did it say?" "That he was sorry, that he'd spent 8 years taking me for granted, and he finally understood what he'd lost. He asked if there was any chance—" She stopped, laughed once. "He actually asked if there was any chance we could reconcile." Cassian went very still. "What did you tell him?" "Nothing. I burned the letter, because there's nothing left to say to him. That marriage died the moment he told me I was too invisible for his world. I'm not interested in teaching him how to see me, not anymore." "Good. But I did write him one sentence before I burned it. I wrote, 'Thank you for showing me exactly who I never want to become.'" They stood in silence, watching the city breathe below them. Somewhere out there, enemies were planning moves. Allies were positioning for advantage. The constant chess game of power continued whether she participated or not. But tonight, standing on this terrace with Cassian beside her and the weight of an empire settling across her shoulders like a crown that finally fit properly, Lysandra felt something she hadn't felt in 10 years. Not happiness exactly, but purpose. She had survived betrayal, survived bullets, survived becoming the thing she was afraid of and finding a way back from the edge. And in the process, she had learned something her father never understood. Power wasn't about making people fear you. It was about making them believe you were strong enough to protect what mattered: her family, her empire, her name. The Veil Syndicate had fallen when her father died, but it had risen again, stronger, smarter, more dangerous than anyone anticipated, because this time it was led by someone who understood that survival wasn't about being ruthless. It was about being ruthless when necessary and merciful when strategic. It was about knowing the difference. And Lysandra Vale finally knew the difference. She raised her glass toward the city, toward the harbor, toward the invisible empire spreading beneath the lights. "To survival," she said quietly. Cassian raised his glass. "To survival." They drank while the city glittered below them, and the future waited to be shaped by decisions not yet made. And somewhere in the darkness, in every family and operation and syndicate watching the eastern seaboard, one message was becoming crystal clear. The Veil Syndicate had returned, and this time it was here to stay. Far away in California, Angelo Moretti sat in a cheap motel room watching news coverage of Veil Syndicate expansion across the eastern seaboard. He had lost everything: his operation, his reputation, his family's legacy. All because a woman he'd underestimated had proven more dangerous than her father ever was. He poured himself cheap whiskey and toasted the television screen bitterly. "To Lysandra Vale," he said to the empty room, "the woman who destroyed me without firing a single shot." The news coverage continued. Markets responding to Vale control over shipping routes, politicians distancing themselves from investigations, families throughout the region quietly renegotiating arrangements to avoid becoming the next example. Angelo drank and understood something fundamental. He hadn't lost to superior force. He'd lost to superior strategy. And there was no coming back from that. Oh. In a penthouse downtown, Kael Varelli stared at a glass of scotch. He couldn't afford any more and thought about the woman he'd married 8 years ago. He remembered her as quiet, invisible, background noise to his ambition. He'd been so spectacularly wrong. The television showed footage from a charity gala where Lysandra had appeared as guest of honor. She wore black, diamonds, the kind of confident elegance that made everyone else in the room look diminished. Cassian Drakov stood beside her, not behind, not hovering, just present, the way a partner stands, the way Kael never had. He'd spent 8 years making her smaller so he could feel larger, and she'd spent 8 years quietly building an empire while he played at having power. The divorce papers sat on his desk, signed, finalized, official. He was free, and he had never felt more trapped, because somewhere out there, the woman he'd dismissed as too soft for his world was reshaping the entire eastern seaboard through calculated brilliance and carefully applied force. And he was sitting alone in an apartment he could barely afford drinking scotch, and wondering when exactly everything had gone so catastrophically wrong. The answer was simple. The moment he'd looked at Lysandra Vale and failed to see her. Everything else was just consequence. A seat. Back on the terrace at the Vale estate, Lysandra leaned against the railing and let the night air wash over her. 3 months ago, she'd been dying in a basement with Vincent's bullet in her shoulder. 2 months ago, she'd walked into a trap and emerged with an empire. 1 month ago, she'd finalized the divorce that ended 8 years of pretending to be someone she wasn't. Tonight, she was exactly who she was always meant to be. Powerful, dangerous, capable of mercy and ruthlessness in equal measure. Lysandra Vale, not Kael's wife, not Jonah's daughter, just herself. Finally, Cassian wrapped his arms around her from behind, careful of her shoulder, gentle in ways that contradicted everything terrifying about him. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "Everything. Nothing. How strange it is that the worst thing that ever happened to me turned out to be the thing that saved me." Kael leaving? Kael showing me exactly who he was, who I was when I was with him, how much of myself I'd erased to make him comfortable. She turned in his arms to face him. If he hadn't betrayed me, I would have spent the rest of my life being invisible, being safe, being nothing. You were never nothing. I was to him, and I let myself believe that was all I deserved. She touched his face. "Thank you for seeing me when I couldn't see myself. I've seen you since the beginning, before you married him, before you hid. You were always exactly this." He kissed her, soft and careful and full of promises that felt possible now. "I just waited for you to remember." The city lights glittered below them, the harbor whispered against rocks, and somewhere in the darkness, the Vale Syndicate continued expanding with the patient inevitability of something that understood its time had finally come. Lysandra had returned home, not to the house, not to the estate, but to herself. And that was the only victory that actually mattered. The camera pulls back slowly from the terrace. 2 figures silhouetted against city lights, an empire spread beneath them like a kingdom made of shadows and careful calculation. The woman who everyone underestimated had finally claimed everything they said she couldn't hold, and she'd done it by becoming exactly who they were afraid she'd be. Strong enough to destroy, smart enough not to, and ruthless enough that nobody would ever dare test which version they'd encounter. Lysandra Vale was home, and the eastern seaboard would never be the same.